Welcome everybody to this November ordinary meeting of Council. Acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Wiradjuri people, and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging. A declaration of webcasting. I inform all those in attendance at this meeting that the meeting is being webcast and those in attendance should refrain from making any defamatory statements concerning any person, councillor or employee, and refrain from discussing those matters subject to closed council proceedings as indicated in clause 14.1 of the Code of Meeting Practice. I notice that all councillors are present, so there'll be no apologies. Declarations of interest. There being no declarations of interest, item 5 is confirmation of minutes of the past council meeting. Moved Councillor Ring, seconded Councillor Goodwin. Those in favour? Councillor Leslie? Against? No? Unanimous? Commemorations and announcements. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to acknowledge the passing of Jack Abbott, who was a long-term Portland resident who recently passed away. He was also one of the gentlemen that was featured on the Portland silos, and our thoughts and prayers to those of the family.
Thank you, Councillor Coleman. Any others? Councillor Statham.
Yes, I would like to pass our sincere sympathy to Lee Stevens, who was a wonderful community worker for the CWA and Red Cross in the Portland-Wallerawang area for many years. And also there's been a lot of functions on, so to all the committees and the people involved organising these functions and events, including council staff, need to be congratulated. The Portland Spinners had a fundraiser recently, the Beehive Garden Party, Lithgow the Arts Trail, a dementia day at the library, which is something that's happening now, which has been very successful. The Hippie Foundation graduation, an excellent tourism forum through Mr Muir and Matthew Prowie, 4 drought relief events, Portland-Wallerawang Skate Park openings, the quota fundraiser yesterday, and I also concur with Councillor Coleman, the passing of Jack Abbott. He's one of the local cement workers that's photographed or not photographed. He's been painted on the stacks at Portland. I think that's a very big honour to have that done. So he'll be very much missed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Statham.
Mayor Tom. I'd like to acknowledge all the work being undertaken by our firefighters, both volunteer and paid personnel. They're doing a great job fighting fires all over the state. The one currently at Gosford's Mountain is the largest we've ever had in the Lithgow LGA, and I think it's important that we acknowledge the sacrifices that they make.
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Ring.
Yeah, I've just got one. Brad DeLosa and his skills team, wood chopping team, for becoming world champions once again. So I'd just like to acknowledge those people in his team and bring Lithgow to the map again.
Thank you, Councillor Goodwin. Any others? Okay, we'll move to public forum. Our first speaker is Denise Shower from 76 Glenrock Place.
Yes, good evening. Thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I'm actually from Granger Place, but I'm speaking on behalf of the development application for 76 Glenrock Place. And I do want to thank all councillors and all staff members of council for coming out and inspecting the proposed development. And look, we read the council development assessment report, and we would like to make some comments on that if we could. We were extremely disappointed that council have recommended approval of the DA. We've had advice from an independent town planners and have emailed a written report to each of the councillors, and I think to Mr Faulkner, and can't remember who else, I'm sorry, a couple of staff members as well. In the Town Planner's opinion, Lithgow Council might be in breach of the Environmental Planning and Assessment Act 1979 if it were to grant consent to this DA. And his belief was, Council have said in their report that they have historically allowed the erection of domestic sheds on R5 land without the existence of a dwelling, on the proviso that the shed remains for domestic use only. He believes this is in breach of the Act. This land is not being presently used as residential, and something, in this case a garage, cannot be ancillary to something that does not yet exist, that is a dwelling house. If this DA is approved, it will be interesting to see how the Land and Environment Court view this. That was his advice to us. So I just wanted to bring that forward. In 5.3.7 of the report, it is stated that the proposal is for a domestic shed to store personal items. This proposed size is in excess of that required for domestic use. It is larger than the Hartley Rural Fire Shed, being 3 metres longer and at least 1 metre higher than the Hartley Fire Shed. The proposal is only 2 metres shorter than the Marangaroo Rural Fire Shed, and we've all seen that up on the highway. And it's also about 1.5 metres higher than the Marangaroo Fire Shed. These two sheds house the firefighting engines, all the equipment, and the personnel. So how can this one be considered a domestic shed? This shed is larger than those rural fire sheds. So we are concerned about the size of it. The size, scale and bulk would not normally be considered for domestic use of this proposal. We received a brochure in the mail recently, and there's a shed in here 12 metres by 24 metres, which is the floor space, the floor size. This one's only 5 metres high. You can get a real bargain here. But this is under yeah, I won't be long. This is under industrial and commercial sheds. It's not under domestic sheds. This is a size for industrial and commercial size. This is part of our concern. We have been informed that the applicant restores cars and is intending to install a hoist, and yet council report states the proposal is not expected to cause any noise issues in the surrounding area. And we wonder how they can arrive at this conclusion, given that that's what we've been told it's going to be used for. If it is to be used for these purposes, that is car restoration, how will the shed be used in the future and by any new owners? The report also states on 4 occasions that its location will be highly visible until vegetation matures. This could be anything up to 10 years. As long as the trees survive, and as long as the trees survive and they're not replaced with new plantings that might be less than 1 metre in height. A condition of consent is that landscape screening is to be maintained in perpetuity. Who would monitor this? Council also claim the shed will not block the existing iconic views. We feel this is false. We look out at the view and we can see where this shed is going to go. You see the empty space. Once the shed's there, that's what we'll see. It will impact our views. We feel our concerns have been downplayed and minimised. Council also state that the proposal is expected to result in a neutral social and economic impact. Let me assure you, it is having and will continue to have a huge impact on our psychological well-being and our enjoyment of our property. We feel that this application has not considered the impact on us as neighbours, nor do we feel that Council has given due weight to our concerns after reading this report. The proposed garage is excessive in dimensions. Council claim they have given approval for other sheds similar in size in the R5 zone. And sure, there are sheds in this area. However, we can find none of this size and height in a location visibly impacting on neighbours to this extent. It has also been stated in 5.3.7, the shed has been located on the site to facilitate the future construction of a dwelling. Our proposal to turn the shed 90 degrees and moving it back in line with the shipping container would still leave more than enough room to accommodate a future dwelling. The block is around 4.7 acres and the flat area for the house is about 1/3 of the block, that is 1.6 acres. Surely enough room to accommodate a house and shed without it being in the current position. We never proposed that it be placed in the lower wet or poorly drained area. The report can be very technical about all the issues regarding the proposal. However, if this shed is built in the current location, we will be the ones looking at it every day, and we are the people who will be negatively impacted every day. Surely there's another solution that can be beneficial to both parties. Thank you for your
The next speaker is Mr Cole Hunter, Rural Roads.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. My concern is overhanging limbs on the rural roads. We had an incident at Anarel Road the other day that overhanging limbs could have contributed to, where a truck caught fire and then caused a bushfire. Now, I actually asked for some of the drought funding money to be used for this tree lopping, and I don't see any of it done. The only place that I've seen any tree lopping done is on Hazel Grove Road. Council has done a great job along there, and I thank you for sealing that road. But there's many other rural roads where high hay trailers have got to get in and stock trucks have got to get through, and these overhanging limbs are a problem. So whether anything can actually be done now or whether any of the drought funding remains to be used, if you could look into that. But I just thank you again for those sealed sections of sealed road. Another one that I've been travelling lately is Glen Davis at the three-way intersection. That's a big improvement. So thank you for those.
Thank you, Mr Hunter. There's no more people down to speak on. So is there any items on the agenda that somebody would like to speak to? You want to speak to an item on the agenda?
No, I registered.
Oh, you registered, did you? I'm sorry, if you've registered, I just haven't got it. I just wasn't aware of it.
I'm not happy about it, but I did register before.
Yeah, that's fine. If you've registered, I'll take your word for it. That's fine, John. He's from Portland.
Well, thank you, Mr Mayor and councillors, officers and the public gallery. Firstly, many happy returns to the Mayor. I hope you had a good day yesterday. I wish to raise concerns about the ongoing deterioration and unsatisfactory condition of Stridle Lane in Portland between Walgan and Cullen Streets. It's very dangerous for vehicular and pedestrian traffic, is widely used by both and receives adverse comments from many visitors who view the yesteryear signs which adorn both sides of the lane. I raised the question of having it included in the operational works program for this financial year, which was subsequently not included and would be further considered in the next year's budget. I would urge Council to review the situation. There's no doubt going to need remedial work in the near future, and it would be better to spend money wisely and fix the problem instead of band-aiding it until later. It certainly received adverse comments and is not a good look for Council. And furthermore, I feel if it was left in its present condition, at some point could be a problem for Council with liability. Now, I understand that part of the problem is drainage, so I'm the engineer probably aware of that type. So, appreciate that. The second matter, Mr Mayor, is in the situation with the old Portland Hospital site, which was unfortunately disposed of by the New South Wales Government some 3 years ago, against the wishes of the Portland community. And since the sale, it has deteriorated badly with no apparent action by the owner to develop the old hospital buildings or associated land. And in the environment today concerning fire hazards, it's certainly one of them. Could Council please investigate what options or jurisdiction it may have with a view to having discussions with the owner on future plans for this large unused site in Portland? Thank you.
Is there anybody in public gallery who wish to speak on any items on the agenda?
My name's Alan Bulkley. I wish to speak about the proposed development at 111 Untitled Drive, Lithgow.
Sorry, your name again?
Alan Bulkley.
Alan Bulkley.
I'm a long-term resident of 21 Maddox Lane, which is owned by my father and is an agreed principal by my immediate family, but I am to become the future owner of this property. In principle, I and my immediate family disagree with the approval of this development proposal, but we respect the rights of the landowners and acknowledge council needs. This Maddox Lane property will be directly affected in the long term if this development is approved and proceeds. Currently, we do not have any direct neighbours on adjoining residential property, and eventually could have neighbours on three boundaries of this property when this development fully proceeds and developments are built and occupied on the proposed adjoining lots to Lot 21. This submission relating to the fencing, in particular fencing with existing boundary shares that have current dwellings, are occupied and is numbered item 1 on page 40 of the report related to the development. Public submissions by myself and my immediate family include matters related to the provision of adequate and reasonable fencing provided by the applicant to provide privacy and security to those who currently have adjoining property boundaries with the proposed development. The applicant's response, as page 41 of the report is, fencing to be provided to an urban standard. Council officers' response on page 42 of this report indicate that no fencing is proposed as part of this development, and fencing of future dwellings would be assessed under separate applications. No mention is made by council officers of fencing with current dwellings on the adjoining property. Further review of Schedule A, conditions of consent, do not include conditions for provision of suitable fences for privacy and security with existing adjoining land and dwellings. Now I have three questions which I'd like to address to the council and the applicant, which I notice who isn't here tonight. My question 1 is, can the applicant clarify what urban standard fencing is and to what basic specifications, for example, materials, height of the proposed fencing, for example, is it going to be colour-blind, 1.8 metres high? Question 2, can the applicant clarify which specific lot boundaries of the development are to be fenced at the expense of the applicant, as this is not specified? And question 3 is, what is the council's opinion on the requirements of the development application for reasonable and adequate fencing to provide for privacy and security to those who currently have adjoining property boundaries with the proposed development? Thank you.
Okay. Again, related to proposed development, 111 Ian Holt Drive, Lithgow.
Could you just give me your name, thanks?
Paul Bulkley.
Yep.
I'm
Thanks,
Paul Bulkley, the eldest son of the owner and resident of Lot 21 Maddox Lane, and the brother of Alan, a resident at this lot. In principle, I disagree with the approval of his development proposal due to the longer-term effect upon my father and brother, who for over 30 years had appreciated and valued not having direct neighbours, and eventually could have neighbours on three sides of the property. I also note from recent discussions that other landowners and residents of Maddox Lane are not in favour of approval of this development. I do personally acknowledge the legal rights of landowners and the progressive need for residential land in this area. I'll raise one item of council, and it relates to the funding for community facilities and public space and the associated planning agreement with the applicant, being the applicants. In the development report, numerous mention is made of the very generous contribution of the applicant in contributing $3,000 per lot, totaling $96,000 for the 32 proposed lots for funding for community facilities and public space. The associated planning agreement on 75 of the report states, Quote, the proposed development is for a subdivision of land from one allotment into 32 allotments. This will result in an increase in demand for public facilities, end quote. And that council must consider the social impacts of the proposal on the immediate locality and the wider community, and then ensure that community facilities are available to address this matter. The effects section of the planning agreement states, quote, the effect of this planning agreement will allow for the provision of facilities of public use within the Lithgow local government area, end quote. My question to council is directed to council. In consideration of the immediate Lithgow locality, would it be more appropriate to specifically allocate the entire funding or a larger specified percentage of the funding for the provision of communities facilities in Lithgow locale, and then specifically detail these matters in the planning agreement? My overall concern is that eventually owners in the proposed state may be indirectly paying for this contribution in lot purchase price from the eventual developer with little local value, although where they would still have access to wider community facilities. Further to this, I do note that the applicant has expressed to me personally that he does intend to on-sell the development if approved and not undertake development himself. Thank you.
Just a quick answer from Mr. Muir.
That one's fairly easy for a quick answer. My suggestion would be, yes, it is possible for a voluntary planning agreement to be more specific in its allocation of funds. And my suggestion would be when the voluntary planning agreement goes on public exhibition, that any person can make a submission along those lines, and then the council could consider that when it comes back for adoption.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew Mirror. My father, Noel Walkley, has asked me to speak on his behalf as his legal representative. Is that permitted?
That's fine.
Okay. Okay. This question is directed to council and the applicant. Unfortunately, he's not here. Matter, access to Maddox Lane for pedestrian use. This matter relates to access to Maddox Lane for pedestrian and emergency access. The proposed development plan does not provide for any access to Maddox Lane for either vehicle, emergency access or egress, or pedestrian use, bearing in mind that it's proposed that only one main road within the development be provided, which will join Ian Holt Drive. Consideration be made for the provision of a narrow access path for pedestrian use, emergency access or egress at single vehicle width for use if needed in the event of the emergency. The boundary between the proposed lots 20 and 21 could be used for the location of this access path to Maddox Lane, and yet still provide lots of over 2,000 square metres, which is the minimum lot size proposed for the development. This proposed access path on the Maddox Lane would provide legal access to both Maddox Lane and the recently completed footpath on Walgren Road that ends at the intersection with Maddox Lane and goes directly past the community facilities available at the Lithgow tennis courts. On behalf of my father, thank you.
Mr. Grave.
Thank you, Mayor. Sue Graves. My question's in relation to page 35, cemetery operations. And on the second last dot point, it indicates that detail of the allotment owner or holder of the burial licence is responsible for the ongoing repair and maintenance of the headstone and monument in the event of damage, vandalism or disrepair. My question, Mayor, is that's really only taking into account if there are descendants. I mean, if a walk through the cemetery, any of the cemeteries here in Lithgow, indicate there's some that are in disrepair and perhaps have no ancestors, nobody able to look after them. So it's not taking into that particular wording is not taking into account anyone who would have no descendants. And you're talking about the owner, so the owner is the person that's buried, I assume. So if that's the case, they can't be responsible to repair it. So I just wonder if you could clarify that at some stage, please.
Mr. Edgecombe.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Thompson. typically we would place the onus for repairs onto the family who holds the right of burial, but in the instance where we don't have those details or the details of the owner no longer exists, the policy does make provision in that instance that we would make repairs in order to deem the area safe and operable, essentially.
Thank you. Mr. Ticehurst.
Thank you, Mayor and Councillors. I wanted to speak to a number of items. The first one is 9.4 in regards to Two Bells Road. I was wondering whether there's some information that could be provided to the now instead of the notice of motion as regards to where we are with the update of that. I gather there's not a report. It'll probably be a verbal report, I imagine.
Look, at the appropriate time of when it goes up, it's early in the piece, so it is a notice of motion, so there will be an answer given, Mr. Ticehurst.
Thank you. The second one is in regards to the operations report at 11.2. Mr. Hunter raised the issue about the road out at Sodwells in regards to the bushfire the other day. The railway bridge out there has been damaged for nearly 12 months, I think. It's had 2 falls of bricks onto the railway line. There's all barricades that have been absolutely hammered by trucks going out there that are clearly too wide. There was issues trying to get dozers out there for the bushfire coming in from this end. I was wondering whether there's any update through the Operations Committee as to when that is going to be fixed, because it seems to be a major item trying to get anything through there at the moment, or before there's another fall on the railway line when there's a train coming through.
Mr. Edgecombe.
Council has raised its concerns in the past regarding the bridge on Sodwells Road in particular. We shared your concerns, but thankfully that bridge is the responsibility of John Holland currently. They're effecting repairs, and while I don't have any information to date, that is something that I can provide to the Operations Committee when the time comes.
I was wondering whether, because it is urgent, whether it might be considered at the end of the meeting to get the local member to get that moving. Someone would wish to bring that up. The other last item is that I was wondering whether the councillors might be of a mind to move a procedural motion to bring forward the Hartley DA and the matters spoken to by the Bulkley family, so that they're not sitting here all night waiting for the matter to come before council. Thank you.
So that's up to the council. Yep. Yeah.
Mayor Thompson, I'd like to move a procedural motion to move 10.41, the annual reports to be presented immediately following the presentation from Crow Australia, their audit report.
I'll put those 3 to the council, and I'll do them in that order. There's also another person that wants to speak from the public gallery before we move into.
Yeah, g'day. I've had the pleasure of meeting you before at the Lithgow Golden Muzzle. I'm also from 6019 Holt Drive. I'm sort of against the proposal.
Your name, please?
John Chapman.
John Chapman. Thanks, John.
Yes, and I'm against the proposal also because I've got greyhounds there. I've had greyhounds there for 11 years. I moved there. I cleaned up the place. I've looked after the place, and I don't cause any neighbours any dramas. And now I'm going to have 5 houses and a big estate when I moved up here in the first place to train greyhounds. The other thing that concerns me is the inlet and outlet that goes down along my place. The traffic and the fog, the trucks coming down the highway. I can see it's going to be a lot of accidents there because it's a 100k zone and the trucks come flying down there, they come bellowing down there. You're going to have like 200 cars moving in and out in the fog, early in the morning, late at night. So I don't even think that's good, good planning for access to be there. The other thing is the environment, the hedge. along that fence, that hedge is not the right type of hedge. I've got to cut that back every year, right? The fencing, there's going to be dogs over there running up and down the fence line, people looking straight into my yard. You know, I've got a lot of concerns about it, and I moved there for privacy, and I'm going to lose all that. Okay.
Any other speakers in public forum? Mr Townsend.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, councillors.
Just state your name, thank you.
Cy Townsend, resident at 78 Glenrock Place. I've been asked to talk again on the development of this shed for Mr and Mrs Fields, as they're out of the country at the moment and couldn't be here, obviously. They've got a few dot points here that they have shot down for me to point out. They'd like to thank the council staff that made the effort to go down and have a look at this issue. The first point they've made is the development is compliant with council requirements. They have made some changes to the colour to accommodate the concerns, despite the DA being compliant with council requirements. They purchased the block over 3 years ago, and at the time there was 12-metre high trees along the fence line and in the vicinity where they would like to build the shed. But due to the risk of them falling because of the amount of wet weather we'd had at that particular time, they had those trees felled, and they have replanted some sort of pine tree along the boundary line to give some privacy in the future. On purchasing the block, the owners sought some advice from building contractors and planners and gained the advice for the best location to build the house and the shed, and the area where they've got it pinned out was the advice that they were given was the best place, given that they have a required building envelope to remain in. The aim is to build a house opposite the shed, and they want the shed that way, and given that the proposal for the house means only you have to build one driveway. The proposed garage is in line with the existing neighbours. That'd be my place in Glenrock Place, and they've they've purposely done this so that it's aesthetically pleasing from the street. A lot of time and money has been spent developing the block. Those blocks that we bought down there were quite swampy and overgrown, and it was just general farmland fenced off when we bought those blocks. And the Fields have spent quite an amount of money and time developing their block. It's almost like a golf course when the rain's falling. Moving the shed will require the purchase of quite a large amount of landfill. Although it is only a gradual slope on the block there, they will need to import some fill, which is another added expense. The aim is to have a concrete driveway, so to move the shed further back is another added expense that they would like to avoid. Existing sheds have been built in the same proximity to the boundary, so that they don't see that as an issue. And I take on board what the earlier speaker said about the size of the shed. We can all put a title on whether it's an industrial shed or a domestic shed, but I don't think size matters where noise is involved. You can make just as much noise in a little shed as what you can in a big one. So that's all I'd like to say. Thank you very much.
Is there anybody else in public gallery? Okay, we have a presentation from Crow. If I just get back to my from Ashpather, and we will bring 10.4 forward for consideration. The Finance and Assets Report. Somebody like to move that way, please? Moved Councillor McAndrew, seconded Councillor Smith. Listen to the report before there's any debate. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr Mayor, councillors, ladies and gentlemen. My name's Ash Pather. I'm here tonight representing the Audit Office to present their report on the conduct of the audit for the year ended 30th of June 2019 on Lithgow City Council. The Audit Office has audited the general purpose financial statements and the special purpose financial statements for the Council as required by the Local Government Act. The Audit Office has expressed an unmodified opinion on Council's general purpose financial statements and special purpose financial statements. This is therefore a clean audit opinion, reflecting that in all material respects, the financial report is in accordance...
Could you just speak up just a little louder for us? Thank you.
The financial report is in accordance with the financial reporting frameworks. With respect to the Audit Office's work, they would like to comment on some key financial metrics. With regards to the income statement, Council's operating result was a surplus of $1.7 million compared to a $2.5 million surplus for the previous year. Whilst rates and charges revenue was up from $25.9 million to $27.4 million, employment costs and depreciation charges were not fully offset by this additional revenue and hence a smaller surplus than the prior year. In terms of the net operating result, excluding capital grants and contributions, this was consistent with the prior year, being a deficit of $1.7 million. In terms of the statement of cash flows, Council's cash and cash equivalents amounted to $30 million at the end of the year, in comparison to $33.9 million in the prior year. The main movement in cash was due to repayment of outstanding loans during the year. In terms of some other financial metrics, the operating performance ratio. The operating performance ratio measures how well Council contained operating expenditure within operating revenue. The benchmark set by the Office of Local Government is greater than 0%. Council's operating performance ratio of -3.1% was below the industry benchmark, and this was due to expenses, particularly employment costs, increasing at a faster rate than operating revenue. Council has planned for improvement in the consolidated operating performance ratio, including improvements to asset management in the coming year. In terms of the own source operating revenue ratio, the own source operating ratio measures Council's flexibility and degree to which it relies on external funding. Council's own source operating revenue ratio came out at 75.4%, which is above the OLG's benchmark of 60%. In terms of the unrestricted current ratio, this is used to measure, specific to local government, measure Council's ability to meet its short-term obligations as they fall due. The benchmark set by the OLG is 1.5 times, and Council's liquidity ratio of 1.93 times is greater than that. In terms of the debt service cover ratio, the debt service cover ratio measures the operating cash to service debt, interest, principal and lease payments. The benchmark set by the OLG is greater than 2 times, and Council's debt service cover ratio is 3.7 times. In terms of rates and annual charges and the outstanding percentage, the benchmark set by the OLG is 10%, and Council's rates and annual charges outstanding is only 4.8%, which is much less than the benchmark of 10%. In terms of the cash expense cover ratio, the benchmark set by the OLG is greater than 3 months, and Council has an expense cover ratio of almost 9 months. So all in all, in terms of the audit that was conducted, as I mentioned at the start, it was a clean audit, and the audit office has presented an unmodified audit opinion on both the general purpose financial statements and special purpose financial statements.
Any questions from councillors regarding the audit? Okay, thank you very much for your report. There's a recommendation on the bottom of page 49, if somebody would like to move that way. It's been moved by Councillor McHenry and seconded by Councillor Smith. Is there any debate on the audit? If not, then I shall put that recommendation. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Thank you. We're now 10.4.1, isn't it? Yeah. Thank you. Now we'll move to 10.1.4, which is...
Happy to move, Mayor.
Yeah.
10.1.4?
Yes.
Yep.
I just got to find it. Yep, okay. Have I got a seconder? Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Smith. Move Councillor McAndrew. Councillor McAndrew.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Firstly, let me say I understand the concerns of the next door neighbour, but equally I've got to acknowledge the rights of the applicants in this case, and I want to read specifically from points of the report, and I go to page 19 and I'm quoting from the report. The location of the shed has been selected by the applicants based on the opportunities and constraints presented by the site and to enable the erection of a future dwelling on the land. I understand, based when we went down there and had the inspection, both with the applicants and the next door neighbour, the inspection with the applicant was saying that they'd sought advice from builders in relation to the best way to site their home and garage on the site as it stood. And it goes on further to say, the applicant's rationale for the location of the shed is based on the opportunities and constraints of the site as noted above. This is to enable the provision of one large shed rather than multiple structures in a serviceable location on the site and adjacent to the proposed future dwelling house. The shed is considered an appropriate use for the site in its context and is consistent with Council's approach to similar development proposals in the R5 large residential zone. To mitigate the visual impacts of the proposal, conditions of consent are recommended that include the requirements that the external colour of the shed be approved as woodland grey, and I understand the applicants have already agreed with that. Although it was a condition that the council staff put on, the applicants had agreed beforehand in relation to that. Conditions are also imposed requiring the applicant to provide and maintain in perpetuity a satisfactory vegetation screen along the southern boundary of the site. This requires the provision of fast-growing plant species appropriate for the area that will provide a level of visual screening for the proposal over the medium to long term. While some of the points raised in submissions are well made, it would not be possible to justify refusal of the application. For the reasons outlined above, the proposed development is recommended for approval subject to consent conditions. I understand as well that not only has the garage been sited to accommodate the future home, but by in any way of having the applicants move the garage further back affects that link with the proposed home that they will build, but equally will lead to extra cost imposed on them in relation to electricity and in relation to a one driveway servicing both the proposed garage and the future proposed home. As I said, and yes, and we've heard from the night, there are other residents that are there that do support the two applicants. So, you know, I think it's proper and appropriate the application be approved.
Thanks, Councillor McAndrew. Councillor Smith. Don't need to speak. Councillor Ring.
Mayor Thompson, first I'd like, if I could, for you to the administration, ask a question. On page 20 of the report, paragraph 4, it states, conditions are also imposed requiring the applicant to provide and maintain in perpetuity a satisfactory vegetation screen along the southern boundary of the site. This requires provision of fast-growing plant species appropriate for the area that will provide a level of visual screening for the proposal over the medium to long term. My question is, how is that to be policed or enforced?
Mr Mayor.
Well, firstly, let me make it clear, we don't go out and inspect if a tree is dying, no. Often these matters are brought to our attention by people in the area, and which certainly then gives us the power to actually do something about it. That's the key. For a period, there probably would be some ongoing inspections, but I can't guarantee in perpetuity that there's going to be ongoing inspections for that particular matter. It would have to be brought to the council's attention and take action from there.
And if and when brought to council's attention, council would act on it?
Correct.
Okay. Look, I've been really vexed with this development, although it's a garage, it's actually quite a large shed. The LEP allows for it, doesn't have any clear definitions. It will impact on the visual amenity of some of the neighbours, but I will vote for it because I believe that under the LEP and the lack of conditions that we have in it and the lack of the DCP, that the development is within the legal parameters that we have. My other concern when I was thinking of the options, the information that we provided today from an independent town planner, yes, that's fine. However, if those opposed to the development were to sell tomorrow, the people who purchase their properties may build a shed of a similar size. And if the current development was thrown out in the Land and Environment Court, it doesn't preclude another development coming back with a house and the garage being built in the same spot. I find it very difficult. It hasn't been an easy decision for me to support this, and I've been out to the site about 5 times. But that's where it stands. I think we need to lift our game on the planning. It's not a criticism of the staff. Mr Muir knows my views on development control plans and their need. I've made that clear in council over the last few years. I think now we need to get our plan right so that we don't have these situations arising. This sort of development should never come to council. There should have been adequate planning controls in place to allow for the siting and the size. So that's something we need to address over the next 12 to 24 months. Thank you.
Councillor Leslie.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Mrs Shower spoke so well on this matter that it's difficult for me to expound on it. And I'm really disappointed that the council didn't pass my motion of some months back to establish a building committee, because this is exactly the sort of motion, exactly the sort of matter that should have been come to a building committee so that we can actually see it and talk about it and work it out instead of being here in a full council meeting. I called this motion in because I felt that it would set a precedent for the whole Hartley Valley. It will set a precedent for how views and amenities of residents in the valley will be considered in the future. We're talking about a shed on a block of land where there's not a house. So there's no physical constraint on where the shed could be placed. I understand there's one in progress, but there's no physical constraint at the moment as to where that shed could go. And according to the report, this shed is to be used for domestic purposes and storage of personal items only. I've got a shed, 12 metres by 6 metres, and I'm certain I'll fill it with bee boxes and personal items, but no matter how much I fill it with, I'm certain that there will be spare space. This shed is 24 metres by 12 metres. It's 4 times the size of my shed, of my big shed. Not only that, it's 6 metres high. Now, I don't know why you'd want a shed for personal items that's 6 metres high. And it's not a garage. In effect, it's an aircraft hangar or an industrial building. Now, when approving the DAs, the council should not only consider the current use for the building, but should, well, quote, which is for domestic purpose and storage of personal items, but also the potential use for future owners of the property. And I note that the report by the Director acknowledges the impact of the shed that it needs to be mitigated and recommends that the colour of the shed be woodland grey. Well, seriously, if the impact on the shed is on a scale of 1 to 1,000, making the shed woodland grey brings the impact down to 999. It really is just a tokenistic comment that we make it woodland grey. That does not help the resident, and it does not enhance the building. You'll still have a building in the forefront of the neighbours, and it will block out. And I've stood there. I wasn't there at the meeting, but I've been down there. From that backyard, with a shed 6 metres high, where it's placed, you won't be able to see the top of the mountains in the back. It totally destroys the outlook from that property. The recommendations, the way that is in no way does it help the applicant. In no way does it help solve or consider the views of the residents, and it sets that precedent for the rest of the Hartley Valley, and of course the Capity Valley and probably the Waggon Valley. It just sets that precedent, and I think we will live to regret a decision that this is carried here, because it'll keep coming back, and neighbours will start fighting neighbours. People will start. A nice valley at the moment where people actually like each other, people actually get on with each other. This is going to be destroyed, and this is something we really do need to take into account. We're here to try and help people get on with their neighbours. We're here to try and make sure that the amenities of our neighbours, of our citizens, are enhanced. But this shed is really, it's selfish. There's no other aspect for it. It's taking, there's room in the place for everything, and I think it's selfish. I'd like to move an amendment, because I've assessed the vote here, and I feel this particular motion is likely to get through. I'd like to move an amendment that the siting.
Go ahead, let me hear the amendment.
Yes. That the siting of the garage/shed be rotated 90 degrees, and that the Director of Economic Development and Environment be delegated to determine, after consulting all interested parties, the final siting of the shed/garage.
Have I got a seconder for Councillor Leslie's amendment?
I'm happy to second that.
Seconded, Councillor Coleman. Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Coleman? Do you want to speak to it, Councillor Leslie? Or you just have. Councillor Coleman.
Like many of the councillors in this room, I've really struggled with this decision. No one knows sheds better than I do. My husband literally lives in his and does his work out from it. And I understand how important one shed is, to someone. But we need to look at a compromise. If 90 degrees helps solve both solutions, the neighbours are entitled to their shed, but the neighbours looking at the shed are still entitled to their view. And I did visit the property and I saw what was going to happen. I saw the view being blocked. And in Hartley, it's the last place to get the sun, and it's the last place to see the sun because of the valley. And I just think that it would hinder the view of the neighbours.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak to the amendment? Councillor McAndrew.
I certainly want to oppose it. Turning the garage at 90 degrees will completely destroy what the applicants are trying to do. And I repeat again, on purchasing the block, the owners approached to build it again advice on the best location to build a house. They aim to build a house opposite a shed such as there is one driveway. A lot of time has been spent developing the block to level the land completely in the flattest part of the building envelope. not as if they've just done it half-hearted. They've put a lot of work, a lot of planning into it, and citing the best possible way to site the garage and at a later date the home. It's their block, and I repeat again, the shed is considered an appropriate use for the site in its context and is consistent with Council's approach to similar development proposals in the R5 large lot residential zone. Turning it at 90 degrees completely destroys what the applicants are trying to achieve.
Any other speakers to the amendment?
Mayor Thompson, I unfortunately couldn't make the original inspection. However, I went down last Saturday week and spent an hour and a half stepping out, looking at the situation. I believe, like all councillors in this room, it's a difficult situation, it's a difficult decision. My one thing that nobody has said tonight is what has probably swayed me is I would not vote for this if there were a lot of objections. I believe from Mrs Schroer there's her and her husband's objection and one other objection. Is that correct, Mr Muir?
My understanding is there are two submissions on this proposal.
Two submissions,
I
yes.
can't say who they are.
Yes. So we're all placed in a very difficult position. I understand what Councillor Leslie has suggested, and I suggested that to Mrs Schroer as well. Unfortunately, the Fieldses are out overseas. Is there a way we can defer this and get the Fieldses in the one room with council staff and try and mediate something to try and perhaps get a good outcome? They are large blocks. We're not talking about a next door neighbour that's right next door. It's 150 metres from the back door of the Schroers to the Fieldses, which is a considerable amount of space. And there's also the trees in place to give that vegetation that's required. But, you know, we don't want bad neighbours. Is it possible to defer this until the Fieldses come home and try and get council staff and in a civilised meeting to see if we can get something that will go halfway? Is that a possibility or not?
Look, I'd have to ask Mr Muir's advice on this. I mean, as far as council's concerned, it meets the approval of the site. So it's very, very hard to to see that deferring it is going to make any difference.
Yeah, I understand that.
Councillor Reen.
Mayor Thompson, I can't support the amendment without knowing the financial impact on the proponent. It'd be unfair, or looking and seeing the additional requirements for housing, how it all fits together. As I said before, this comes back to our planning controls. We need to tighten them up. I don't necessarily think this sets a precedent. I don't like this garage, but I don't believe legally we can refuse it.
Councillor Goodwin.
Yeah, Mr Mayor, I'm of the same opinion. This is a very hard decision, and I don't think deferring it's going to be an option. In my view, I think that we should. I don't want to go rehash over the things that everyone else has said because I think they're all important. I did go down there and have a look as well, as along with everyone else. The thing that I did notice when I went down there is that the neighbour has also got trees of similar of a similar size bigger trees, but of a similar tree that the people have planted to block their view. And the trees that the neighbours had on their property were probably 2 to 3 times taller than the trees on the side that the builder is the owner of the shed's going to build. The 2 to 3 times the size. So and the same tree. So I think that and with unobstructed view from the sun. So those trees are going to be big on the neighbour's side, which in my belief will probably block that view anyway, along with those trees. That's something that I saw when I was down there that really stuck in my mind about the area and about her view.
Any other speakers?
Yeah, I agree with Councillor Leslie on this one. It's a difficult one. I don't want to leave it so that every resident down there can construct a shed of this size. The perpetuity and the screening bothers me. The trees that I think Councillor Goodwin is referring to are going to be cut back as a hedge, a formal hedge. I think it'll have a massive impact on the residents at Glenrock Place. The problem I have with viewing it at the site was that the site was already prepared. I couldn't see anything else or any other way the shed could go because the block was already pegged out, it was levelled, and I think that might have given us a bit more of an idea if we went with the where it wasn't prepared to say, okay, there's consideration for it to go elsewhere. Anyway, if it is passed tonight, I'd like to see the conditions of consent include the fact that the water tanks be included on the southern or northern side, which they aren't part of the consent conditions at present.
I'll just get Mr Muir to speak to that.
Certainly, Mr Mayor. Yes, I suppose we have an amendment to deal with first, but if we get to the point where the council is looking at approving the application, I'd be looking at adding another condition as a replacement number 2 in the recommendations, and the current number 2 to become number 3, but the replacement number 2 would say to minimise visual impact, no rainwater tanks are to be placed along or adjacent to the southern elevation of the shed/garage.
Thank you. Any other speakers to the amendment? Okay, then I shall put the amendment. Those in favour of the amendment? Those against? I declare the amendment lost. Councillor McCann, do you want to speak to, you have your right to reply?
Yes, I do. Based on a couple of comments made. Firstly, let me deal with the issue of concern about how council will continue to look at and report on the growing of the trees on the side of the garage, the perpetuity. I understood that the applicants planted those trees before they were even required to do so by council. So if that isn't shown bona fides in the first instance, that gives me some comfort that they've planted those trees without being urged to do so, I understand. I now see it's a condition, that's fine, but that should give some comfort to councillors and council that certainly in planting those, they'll continue to make sure they look after them and continue to make sure that they will be a screening for the future. Coming back to some of the comments about the garage, there's large garage everywhere down in Hartley. I've driven around as well. I've been down there 3 times to have a look at this specific area, and I've also driven around other areas of Hartley. There are some huge sheds down there. And it's not the first time in this council that a shed has been constructed before the home. There's heaps of examples. It's pretty common, especially in our large residential and rural areas. A lot of people have built garages and then stored gear there while the house and the home's being built. It's not a new thing. It's pretty common. We can't lose sight of the rights of the applicants. They've bought that block, and as was said in earlier comments from the public forum, but those blocks were a fair mess. That's what the applicants told us. They've done a fantastic job cleaning that block up for what it was before, and they've done a lot of work in making sure, in planning the garage and in planning their home to the best benefit that they can in relation to the block. They're entitled, in my view, for this application to go through.
Okay, that's the right of reply, so I shall put that now. Those in favour? Those against? Councillor Goodsall and Councillor Leslie against. Okay, we shall now move to 10.1.13, which is proposed 1 lot into 32 lot subdivision at 111 Ian Holt Drive, Lidsdale. It's a late report. I could get somebody to move.
I'd like to move it to be deferred.
Happy to second that.
Councillor Coleman.
Listening to the public gallery, there's a lot of concerns in regards to this development. I believe that a site inspection is needed. We need to have a clear understanding of what's required, and it was a late report, which also concerns me because we didn't have quality time to read it.
Thank you. Councillor McAndrew.
Yes, Mayor. It was a late report and a fairly comprehensive one. And in just looking at the item without looking at the attachments, a lot of times in development applications, part of the item would be whether there were any objections from landowners or neighbours. And of course, that's not within here at all because there hasn't been time. So I support it on the basis of being a late report, and like we've done with the item we just dealt with a moment ago, if the mover's happy with it, I think the recommendation should be deferral with, as point one, and with a full on-site meeting to be organised between staff councillors, the applicant and interested residents before it's dealt with formally in council.
Councillor McAndrew. Any other speakers?
Could I, through you, Mayor Thompson, a question to administration? Were the neighbours to this proposed development given an opportunity to comment?
Yes.
And there have been no comments received?
There was 5 submissions received in the first exhibition and 1 in the second.
Thank you.
Through you,
Councillor
Mr Mayor, to Mr Muir, were they objections or for the proposal, Mr Muir?
I think you'd probably have to say mostly of an objecting nature, I would think, yes.
Yeah, I agree we should defer it and have an on-site meeting.
Okay, any other speakers? I shall put that in for the deferral. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. We move to notice of motion 9.1. Councillor Coleman, the sealing of Willowvale Lane, Wallerawang. Councillor Coleman.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, can we just change sealing of Willowvale Lane, change lane to road, please? Because in my understanding it's actually called, it's a road, not a lane. The signpost I drove past there the other day says road.
Yeah. Can I just get a seconder to the notice of motion? Thanks, Councillor Smith. Councillor Coleman.
Thanks. This road was constructed in the 1990s by the Electricity Commission of New South Wales to allow the transporting of the heavy earthworking equipment to the dam site for the construction of the Thompson Creek Dam. The multi-million-dollar road was then handed over to Lithgow Council. This road carries a lot of traffic as fishermen frequent Thompson Creek Dam at the end of the road. It is a major tourist attraction for the locals all year round. Firstly, I would like to congratulate management on their comment. It is important that residents understand how they feel in this matter. However, as councillors voted by the people, for the people, something which can never be taken away from an elected official, is the opportunity to submit a notice of motion or question on notice. Which leads me to a letter a resident received recently from Paul Toole, the Member for Bathurst and the Minister for Regional Transport and Roads. Thank you for your recent letter in relation to the sealing of Willowvale Lane. Willowvale Lane falls under the responsibility of Lithgow City Council, as it is a local road. I will raise this with Council on your behalf. I'm not sure whether he did that or not, but this is dated the 23rd of October, 2019. But may I also suggest you also contact all Lithgow City councillors. My understanding, a number of residents have been lobbying the councillors. They've been very passionate in their lobbying for it. And they state here, and request that your road be considered in their 2020-21 budget. We're already done that, my understanding. But the most important line in regards to this letter is, I will also remind them of government grants available to assist with local road priorities. So basically, Paul Toole, the member for Bathurst, has said, I will also remind them of government grants available to assist with local road priorities. With the government's announcement of more additional funds being available for rural roads, this is an opportunity we need to pursue. As for the other roads mentioned in the management's comment, Hartley Vale Road, Dark Corner Road, Fields Road Rydal, Walgan Road or Wogan Valley remains unsealed, the residents of that road haven't lobbied me, but I do welcome them to do so. I welcome them to lobby me and the fellow councillors and even the local member. But at the moment, I'm here speaking on behalf of residents of Willow Vale Road.
I'll second that if I can put in an amendment and the...
It's already been seconded,
Oh,
Councillor
has it?
Smith.
I beg your pardon?
Councillor Smith. Don't want to speak? Okay.
Yes, look, there are a number of roads in our area that, of course, become priority, but last week and the week before, or for several weeks now, I have contacted, through the General Manager to Mr Edgecombe, several emails that I've received from people along Willowvale Lane. I have corresponded with the General Manager and Mr Edgecombe on a number of occasions over the last probably 2 months now, and also people from Dark Corner and, of course, people from Thompsons Creek Road. Thompsons Creek Road, I would like to see this, if there could be an amendment, if I could make an amendment, please. Would you accept the amendment, Councillor Coleman? Yes, certainly. To add the roads down the bottom, including Thompsons Creek Road. They're all roads that need desperate work on them. And Thompsons Creek Road was used 3 times in 7 months with an accident on the highway, where the tarring is not, where it's not sealed. It's been a really difficult thing for the neighbours and the safety of the people coming in off the highway.
If we're going to write to our local member...
It's just, can I just wait until Councillor Statham finishes things?
So I have already lobbied the local member for a number of these roads. I haven't lobbied for the Fields Road at Rydal and Walgan Road. Nobody has lobbied me, but I've had many, many people lobby me now for many, many months, probably 3.5 years now, for Thompsons Creek Road, which has gone through the General Manager and to Mr Edgecombe. And I also feel very strongly about Willowvale Road. I think that, yes, there are not a lot of residents live up there, but I think it's going to be, it's a wonderful tourist attraction. And I think that with some of the money coming forth with urban roads and rural roads, I think that some of these should be definitely included. Would you consider including those names of those roads, Councillor Coleman?
If we're going to write to the local member and the Minister for Roads, I think that we should ask for as much money as we possibly can. I mean, he's only going to say no, so yes, I accept that.
Well, we don't write to him thinking he's going to say no. That would be very negative. We have to hope and presume that we will get some
I can't
money.
presume anything, so...
No,
Look, can we just have one speaker at a time rather than 2
amendment.
councillors
All right,
having a chat across the chamber? Thanks.
Thank you. If Councillor Coleman accepts that amendment, I'd be very happy. And if Council then could go forward and write an official letter to the Honourable Paul Toole, we'll see if there's any funding available.
Look, I just want to make one comment from the chair. I had quite an extensive drive around Lithgow with the Minister, and he said it is up to Council to prioritise the roads that they believe are the most important. Now, I think that we should take a little bit of notice of our council staff here, and
Yes, I agree.
the ones that agree, that they agree are the most important and need to be prioritised. You know, like as far as roads are concerned, we're lay people. These are the people with the expertise in what roads need to be done and when not to be done. Mr Edgecombe would like to make a comment. Thank you.
Can I talk first?
With regard to the roads, the grant applications that Mr Toole is referring to, it is specifically the Fixing Urban Roads program, which I believe there's a substantial amount of money available for. Council is in the process, the administration is in the process of writing a detailed application for both Hartley Vale Road and Dark Corner Road, as the time allocation for applications was extremely limited. They are due on the 2nd of December, which is within a week. So if we were to add any additional applications under that program, it would make it extremely difficult, but we would need to find resources as such.
Any other, Councillor Goodsall?
Yeah, so if if we were to receive a grant, I'm assuming it would be prioritised on roads that need it. My understanding is that currently Willowbell Road, I've driven on it, it sits at a level 2 out of a level 5, 1 being the best, 5 being the worst. I think that it's been assessed recently at the beginning of November. It's due to be assessed every 6 to 12 months or as needs be. So I'm happy to try to get money out of Paul Till, but I just don't know if you would just refer that straight back to us as a council to deal with when it's not a road of priority.
Mayor Thompson, if I may, I can't support this. I read this and it seems like a very poor rip-off of the Music Oliver, with council going to Paul Till Verbal saying, please sir, give me more. There is a process for getting grants for government. Council funds its road programs through grants and through its own money. How we determine which roads get done has to be based on a system that is fair and equitable to everyone in this community. I asked the question of Mr Edgecombe. He sent that response out to everyone on the basis of which we, as a council, decide what roads are to receive work. The criteria are traffic counts, road classification, condition rating, traffic profile, road geometry. These are the issues that determine how we allocate our funds. I, as a councillor, am not going to be subject to people lobbying saying, I want my road fixed. So the loudest group in the community that jumps up and down gets their road fixed. Sorry, that's not good enough. I want to be able to pass the pub test. I want to be able to support a decision in a court of law that it has been based on an equitable distribution of our scarce resources. I drove up this road today and it's a bloody brilliant road. I can't see any problem with it. It is a great road. We've got roads out there, Hughes's Lane, the second part of it, Backcullen Road, now they're bad. But our current backlog of maintenance for roads is roughly, or the road asset base, is $9.8 million. That does not include sealing the dirt roads. Council is working its way through its asset base in a logical manner and within the constraints of its resources. We take money from a road that doesn't, put money onto a road that doesn't need it, then a road that is desperate for work will not get done. Our decision and allocation of resources on asset management should be based on facts and real needs, not on who's jumping up and down and yelling the loudest. We need to rely, in this instance, on the staff. Yes, when it comes to us, there might be some roads that are similar and we may have a final say. But I think we have to be very methodical in the way we repair our roads or we are never, ever going to get through the backlog. Thank you.
Any other speakers to the amendment? Councillor McAndrew.
It's not an amendment, we've got the one agreed motion.
Oh, well, it's agreed now, it's a motion, yes,
yeah.
Fair
well,
enough.
Well, look, I'd just like to clarify something. We've got a recommendation, we've got management comments, so just bear with me. The recommendation reads this way, or it's changed now. So, the Lithgow City Council approached the Honourable Paul Till, State Member for Bathurst, seeking funds to seal 6 roads now. I then look at the management comment, but isn't the recommendation simply saying, correct me if I'm wrong, if we send him a letter, a local member, and he refuses, that's where these roads go, they don't get done.
Exactly.
That's my understanding of it. I see the management comments. Does that pose an issue for management or not? I'm trying to work the recommendation in its clear, concise form and the management comments that flow from it. The management comment is in relation to us doing the work and paying the money. But the recommendation, in my view, says to me that we seek the funding through our state member, and I read from that, if the funding's not there, they don't get done. That's my understanding of the recommendation. If I'm wrong, somebody tell me, please.
If I might, Mr Mayor, the management recommendation stands as it is. It's not appropriate for management to get into the politics of this situation. The management recommendation is the management recommendation.
So I can clearly understand it then. If we're not successful, then I see that we do nothing. If we're successful with the funds, yes, we'd be then, as council, be duty bound to follow the recommendation to undertake the repairs on the road. Have I got that right?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I see no harm in writing to Mr Toole, but a lot of the residents in our local community have done that as well, and in every instance, Paul has referred us to the grant applications that are available. He hasn't offered any opportunities for funding outside of those areas. If we were to apply for funding for this road, as mentioned within the management comment, there are roads that we consider to be a higher priority that would potentially miss out in that instance. That's why we have chosen Dark Corner Road and Hartley Vale Road in this instance for our applications.
Comment. I'm gathering from that comment staff don't support us asking for the funding from the state member for these 5 roads. Someone needs to be clear.
No, with respect, it's not appropriate to bring the staff into this debate.
The
the management comment is written at the base of the paper, and that is the management comment. The management are saying to you, we have a very deliberate process where council has embarked upon spending lots of money to develop asset management systems so that we can prioritise all sorts of assets, including water assets and road assets, so you can make that decision as a council. That's the management position. We work through that process.
So in a way, what's being proposed throws that process out of whack. Have I got that right now?
Exactly.
Okay, thank you. That's what I needed to understand.
Can I please, I've already spoken, but can I please, everybody else has had another go?
No, Councillor Leslie hasn't spoken.
There is a process. Councillor Ring is right. There is a process. But Minister Toole is the one who's broken the process. He's the one who's written to residents in Willowvale Road saying, lobby your councillors, lobby all your councillors, get a motion up before council, pass this motion, and I've got the money to do it. So that's what it is. And I'd recommend that Councillor Coleman reread this. Point
of order. I don't believe that's what the letter said.
And I would recommend that Councillor... hang on.
I'm going to listen to the point of order first. If you'd take your seat, please, Councillor Leslie.
I don't believe that is what Councillor Coleman said. I don't believe that was the intent of the letter. And I'm happy for Councillor Coleman to clarify it. The resident's right to the local member, the member writes back. That's it.
I'd recommend that it just, if I can continue.
Look, hang on, Councillor Leslie. Would you like to please clarify that question, please, Councillor Coleman?
I think she could do it in her speech and reply.
I'll do it in my reply.
Okay. And I'd recommend that she read the letter again in her speech and reply. And then we get exactly what Paul Toole said. And so we can find out exactly what he's recommending to the residents who wrote to him to do. What he's recommending that the residents of Willowvale Road do. And that's what we're dealing with here. That's the process we're dealing with. What Minister Toole is recommending that the residents of Willowvale Road do. And that's the issue. But in this anonymous management comment, there are things I take exception to. One is...
Mr Mayor, if I might, the management comment is not anonymous. The management comment comes from myself as General Manager on behalf of the staff.
It doesn't ever say that, because in all the other reports we get by the Chief Financial Information Officer or by the others, all we get here, and this is what the people in the public and the people who read this, all they get is management comment. It does not come through as being the General Manager's comment. I think in future, if you're going to do this, it'd be great to have the General Manager's comment on these things, so that it's just not so we have
as far as I'm concerned, management comments are the General Manager's comments.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Fair enough, Mr Mayor. You know it. I now know it, but I don't think the public knows it, and they should.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that's always been the case. The General
Well, it
Manager
should change.
represents the administration. That's always been the case in every council I've worked at.
Well, it should change. In this General Manager's comment, there's a statement, it was determined by council engineers this asset would not be sealed. Really? Who determined it? It's not the engineer's right to determine it. That's our right. We're the ones who do it. This is just a flat statement. It will not be sealed. The asset would not be sealed. Now, I think again, these matters have to come to council. Now, so we get a letter from Mr. Toole suggesting that the residents get a letter from Mr. Toole wanting us to be lobbied. He wants to be lobbied on it. We are lobbying on it. I expect that Mr. Toole will honour his word on this matter.
I thought that I may have misheard, but I thought that the word prioritise was used consistently in that letter. Maybe I heard it wrong, but I haven't got the letter in front of me. But I thought that I heard that word used quite consistently.
Mr Mayor, if I might just clarify to assist Councillor Leslie, this council has authorised management to expend significant amounts of money to develop an asset maintenance regime, and we've been doing that for the last 12 months. And that's all classes of assets. And there's criteria associated with developing that asset management system that identifies which assets of a particular grade need to be addressed first. Now, if council doesn't wish the administration to use that expertise and go through and expend that money and develop the asset maintenance plans, you need to tell us, because you'll be saving an awful lot of ratepayers' money by not going ahead with that, and we can just put these particular requests for roads down to whoever wants to stand up and move and second and pass the amendment. So we're looking for guidance from council on this. If you don't want us to develop that criteria, please let us know.
Can I please say something?
Councillor Smith?
I'm about the only one that hasn't said something. And I second it. Listen, we're going around in circles here. Let's let the management do their job. I want to see Willowvale Lane. I want to see Hughes' Lane. I want to see all these streets done, more than anybody else. But let these guys that we voted in their job, do their job. Otherwise, we're going to be here all night. Let's get fair income, let them do their job and let due process. We're councillors, we're not engineers. Let these people, let that young bloke over there put their letter in for the funding and see how we go before we're down each other's throat. Let's show a bit of common sense for once.
Can I please just say something?
Now, Councillor Statham.
I agree with Councillor Smith. Before, previously in the years I have been on council, my recollection is that when there is funding coming available, that there is an information session like there was last Monday evening, where several items were addressed. When Willowvale Lane was brought up, as was Thompsons Creek Road, Mr Edgecombe said that, you know, anyone wishing to...
A point of order, just take your seat, Councillor Statham. What's the point of order, Councillor Leslie?
Is Councillor Statham actually speaking against the motion that she seconded?
I didn't second it.
No, she didn't second it. She moved an amendment.
I moved
and then the amendment. Then Councillor Coleman accepted the amendment.
That's correct. But when we look back on previous procedures, not very often have I seen a notice of motion come through to get a road done. Not since I've been on council. People will come to public gallery and request it, and no doubt Mr Edgecombe takes that on notice. My understanding is fairly clearly that the council staff, the experts, we have a session in here on a Monday evening, they bring forward some suggestions. It's like the budget, we talk about it, we prioritise them with the help of the professional people, and so be it. Whatever is decided, we as councillors then vote on that. But it is done in a priority way, and I think that a notice of motion today is probably not what we normally would do, and that's not being offensive to Councillor Coleman. It seems to me that in previous years, would Mr Edgecombe through the Mayor agree with that the proposals of different roads are brought forward and then you instigate the priorities and then we as councillors discuss it before it gets to this point?
Look, if we keep going down this track, and Councillor Smith hit it on the head, if we keep going down this track, everybody that's got a friend on a dirt road is going to want their road sealed. You know, so I mean, I've been lobbied for 16 years about Hughes Lane. You know, where Kevin Hughes and Gary Jones and those guys live, and And Dr. Horan, crikey, I've been
Yes, so
lobbied
have I.
and lobbied and lobbied about that, and it's still sitting there as the roughest road in Australia, you know, and now you're looking at a reasonably good road, wanting it sealed, you know. But anyway, Councillor Coleman, you're right to reply.
The basis of this motion is simply write a letter to the Honourable Paul Toole, the Minister of Regional Roads, and ask if he would consider providing funding for the following roads. Priority for me was Willow Vale Road, and I accepted Councillor Statham's amended to include the other roads. Yes, I understand we have a priority list. Yes, I understand that. However, as a councillor, I also understand that people lobby you. That's our job, to listen to them. The people will vote. They vote for you to listen to them. Then they vote according to, you know, they want you to listen to them. I'm here because, like Councillor Statham, I was sent correspondence on Willow Vale Road. And one family has been lobbying this for over 20 years. And I understand how upset they may be. Simply, all I'm asking is for a letter to go to Paul Toole and see how we go.
Right to reply. I shall put that notice of motion. Those in favour? Those against? I declare it carried. Councillor Ring, McAndrew and Thompson against.
No.
Oh, you voted for it? Oh, sorry.
Based on how it's explained, I voted for it.
You're right. So Councillor Ring and Thompson against. Notice of motion, Councillor Leslie, Flood Risk Management Study Plan. Have I got a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I move that Lithgow Council advise Mr Toole that his offer of $60,000 for a flood risk management study and plan is not directed at the problems which have already been identified, these being a major flooding problem at the corners of Main, Lawrence and Cuprow Streets and George Coates Avenue, and also at Marangaroo. As a sign of how seriously this problem is viewed, Lithgow Council is putting aside $350,000 a year from the operations budget to deal with it when funds are sufficient. We request that Mr Toole's $60,000, along with extra funds from the floodplain grants scheme sufficient to finish the job, be allocated to the immediate rectification of the already identified problems. Mr Mayor, if I could just into the General Manager's management comment on stage, there's the fourth line down, stage 2 requires the preparation of a floodplain risk management study and plan to inform appropriate use of the data collated during stage 1. It implies that a flood plan study needs to be formed. But I have a question. If no such study has yet been done, what data was used to upgrade the sewage water upgrade in Windara Place? The stormwater upgrade in Windara Place.
So that, as was noted before, the administration doesn't allocate funds. That was a decision made by the elected council during a meeting. However, the administration advised council at that time that it had met alongside councillors with members of the community within Marangaroo that had had their houses flooded and many thousands of dollars of damage done in that area to their backyards and to the interiors of their homes. And it was obvious to council's engineers at the time that there was grossly inadequate infrastructure that ran underneath the golf club, which was the main exit point of stormwater in the area.
if there is $60,000 available for flood mitigation, then we need to spend it where we've had it, i.e. at George Coates Avenue, Main Street and George Coates Avenue. We've known that problem, and we've known about flooding in Lithgow for yonks. We've known about flooding in Lithgow ever since and before when Farmers Creek went down Genders' mine. That's how long we've known about flooding in Lithgow. It's not something we need to study about. We just need to get and do the work. And it needs to be done now, and therefore we need to advise Mr Toole that thank you very much for the offer of $60,000, but we need it now. And just to point out, 60,000, he's talking about, and here's his press release, he's talking about that the New South Wales government has provided a boost to disaster resilience, today announcing a $1.8 million funding injection to the floodplains grant scheme, including $60,000 for flood mitigation works in the Lithgow area. Well, a $1.88 million sounds like a lot of money. It's less than 1,000th of the amount of money that he announced with 2 days' notice for the upgrade of the Great Western Highway. We're not talking about much here, but you're spending $60,000, which is a fair whack, as it turns out, of $1.88 million. We need to advise him that this is all very well, but stop just talking about what we want to do in the future. Start dealing with what we want to do now, because the very fact that the council is having to put its own money, $350,000 a year, aside for the next 3 years to do it, that's $350,000 a year that is coming out of roads and drains and footpaths right through the rest of our local government area, and that's our priority. We need to get the drain fixed, the flood mitigation fixed, but we don't want to wait for another 3 years. And this is an opportunity where we can tell the state member, that thank you very much, but he's not listening to what is actually needed in our area.
Look, Councillor Leslie, just before I call Councillor McAndrew, who seconded it, what I've got to say is that this was a $60,000 grant applied for by Lithgow Council for risk management of our flood situation. Nothing to do with the fixing up of the flood down in at Cupro Street. Councillor McAndrew.
Well, that probably answers one of the questions I had. I like the recommendation when it talks about $60,000 along with extra funds from the flood plan grant scheme sufficient to finish the job be allocated to the immediate rectification of the already identified problems. But Mayor, are you now saying that the $60,000 can't go into that? Is that what?
Well, it's my understanding is that we applied for a grant for the flood risk management. Mr. Muir, if.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think Mr. Edgecombe's actually explained it quite well on the comment on behalf of the GM in relation to we have already done a floodplain study. That's done. The regime of floodplain risk management planning, if you like, covers 4 distinct stages. The study's been done and Council's adopted that. The next stage relates to the floodplain risk management study and plan, and this all goes towards our strategic planning, which this is why it was applied for by our strategic planning section. But we're talking about documentation to go with planning documents. We're not talking about the structures or anything like that. This is a common program which is run every year. We have budgeted this year. We did budget for a project, I think, of $80,000, of which $20,000 would be allocated by council. We do believe that under the terms of the scheme we'll have to find a little bit more money, but other than that, it is for planning and it has been applied for by council and we have been successful.
So in short, then, it can't be used to increase the $350,000 being put aside each year?
No.
Do I also read from the report, though, it is dealing with the Marangaroo area, the 60,000? Well, the management comments Council has completed stage 1, which studied the extent of flooding of all land in the Farmers Creek and Marangaroo Creek catchments.
The study,
Is that-
the study covered those catchments, that's correct, yeah.
So is that specifically dealing with the Marangaroo flooding or not? I'm trying to understand that.
So the original flood study, which collated all the data regarding overland flooding in the Lithgow area, was for both Farmers Creek and Marangaroo Creek areas. This floodplain management plan would be for Lithgow only, as far as I'm aware.
So not Marangaroo at all. So the coming back to the $350,000 per year for the next 3 years, I understood the major part of that will be near the George Coates Avenue area. Is that correct? Yeah. Okay, and as you've said, the $60, if this recommendation is successful, the $60 can't go to what's being asked anyway, if I got that right. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wing.
If I may, Mayor Thompson, ask a question of the administration through you, possibly to Mr Edgecombe. We're putting away $350,000 a year for 3 years. This is a big job. I believe part of the cost of this is, of course, we are going under the railway. That adds complexity. But I would assume that Mr Edgecombe is looking for opportunities to secure grant funding, which could go towards this project as well. If you could advise, please, Mr Edgecombe.
I probably more than anybody else would love to see that $350,000 a year go into roads. So any opportunity that comes across my desk will most certainly be applied for that work.
I know, Mayor Thompson, I can't support the recommendation. We applied for the grant. It's what we asked for. We can't use it for anything else. Mr Edgecombe is looking for grants, and that's the best we can do.
Any other speakers? Councillor Leslie. Right to reply.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. It's very difficult if one part of council doesn't talk to another. And by this I mean the council puts in a grant for $60,000 for a flood study, but at the same time we have a report coming from the Operations Committee that we need to have over $1 million put aside for to fix the problems at George Coates Avenue.
They're not related whatsoever.
That's exactly right. They're not related.
Yeah.
But they should be.
No.
They should be. And clearly it would be of great assistance to the Operations Committee meeting had this matter been detailed to them. Now, this is one of the reasons that every council in the state, except this one, actually has its mayor as part of the senior management executive meetings. And so, because the mayor is the one person in the whole place that actually understands all points of view on these matters.
Could you please refer to the item that we're speaking about? This has got nothing to do with where the mayor and the management are concerned.
Yes, Mr Mayor. I do understand that you do not go to the senior executive meeting, so I appreciate that that's why you would not want to discuss that. So, because I also was prohibited from going. And so I do understand that, and that's something that, and this is one of the reasons that, of course, is to the detriment of councils. I think it's something that is a vast failure of this council. But getting back to the subject, thank you. The $60,000 is not going to do us any good. We're just going to find out exactly what we already know. We know where the problems are. Sure, that we may well find out in some years' time, in 3 years after we've fixed up George Coates Avenue, etc., that there are problems. And the $60,000 may well be of value then. But it's no use to anyone, especially the people who are affected by flooding in this town at the moment, because no matter what you find out, you won't do anything about it, because all the money that you're going to raise over the next 3 years will be to solve the problems at George Coates Avenue.
Thank you. Okay, that was the right to reply. I shall put that notice of motion. Those in favour? Those against? I declare it lost. Councillor Leslie, New South Wales Electrical Commission costs.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Could I just get a second to thank you first?
I'm happy to second this one.
Councillor Coleman.
There's just one small amendment to my motion, if I may. In point 2, on the last line, for the filling of, and then include the word all, casual vacancies in council by countback. If I could just include that word.
You're quite happy with that, Councillor Coleman? Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. There are two issues here. One is the cost of elections, and one is the cost of by-elections. The General Manager's comment states that for Lithgow Council, the cost of running the next year's local government election will rise by 72%. I don't recall being given the IPART final report, but it may have been. I may have missed it. Was it distributed to councillors?
Through you, Mr Mayor, I don't recall that the final report was distributed to councillors. It is obviously on IPART's website and easily accessible.
I'm sure it is. I don't often browse that particular website in my spare time, but so we have an issue of the cost of elections, which is that with inflation running at approximately 2%, we need to advise Mr Toole that we would expect sufficient funding to keep our costs at or below the rate of inflation. Now, if the IPART funding is going to cover that's terrific. And whilst the point 1 remains as is, it would therefore just become a matter of a reminder to Mr Toole that this is a promise of the state government to do it. However, by-elections are another thing, and I would guess that any by-election that was actually run as an election in Lithgow Council would not get this extra money coming from the state government because it's not part of the general election process, and therefore we could assume that a by-election cost would also rise by approximately 72%. Now, the last by-election we had here, the one for Councillors Goodwin and Goodsell here, cost over $100,000. And this is something that we can totally do without. We can, should there be a by-election coming up after the next election, we need to ensure that it's filled by countback. Now, management comment here, General Manager's management comment here, states that it's all been covered by the OLG report detailing how these amendments are going to be done. Well, the amendments recommended at the moment is that this council, at its first meeting after the election, determines whether the council will have by-elections or fill casual vacancies by countback. It puts that position in this realm, with the councils who will be here at the time. They have to choose on the night, and so imagine the scene. You look around, someone looks around the room and thinks, oh, so-and-so doesn't look very well. Would we win a by-election if that person decided to resign? Or, worse, or is that person on our side and we might lose the by-election, therefore we need to fill the position by countback? It's a rort. You can't, it's either one or the other. You do not have a situation where a by-election is determined on the apparent health of one of the councillors. But that's what the recommendation, that's what the provisions are under current things, which is why when I realised that, I wanted to put in, to eliminate the cost of by-elections, that Mr Toole make representations to the local government minister to enact the necessary regulation to the legislation that he oversaw as local government minister. He was the Minister for Local Government, and these weren't done in 1920 2014, as in this comment here. It was actually done in June 2016, only a couple of months before the last council election. So, for the filling of all casual vacancies in councils by countback. We need to make sure that any countback, any by-election, sorry, any vacancy is filled by countback. It saves us 72% increase in councils. It saves us $150,000 should there be one. And the likelihood of one is not remote. Sure, it's less than 50%, but it's probably over 20%, and it's a figure that needs to be taken into account. It's a figure that you need to be aware of. Is that aimed at me? Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Therefore, in summing up, I just think that we need to pass this. Let Mr. Toole know that hold him to his promise, hold the government to their promise that they will supply money to fund elections and to ensure that all by-elections are filled by countback, and therefore saving, in the event of such a vacancy, saving us as Lithgow Council $150,000. It's also a democratic process. You put someone in who matches, because you recount the votes as though that person wasn't there, and the person who gets elected would be the person who would have got elected, i.e. the next person down the ticket, which keeps the fairness of the whole process. Councillor Goodman would have actually been elected without the necessity for a by-election.
Councillor Coleman.
I don't think any more needs to be said.
Any other speakers? Councillor McAndrew.
I support it. I support both parts of the recommendation for a number of reasons. Even when we look at the cost, well, I support that the cost of the running of the council election be kept no more than the rate of inflation. As far as I'm concerned, that's proper and appropriate. When you look at when council first looked at what the possible cost in 2020 was going to be compared to 2016, was a 72% increase. Even after IPART's done some mixing around, for our council, if I'm reading the report right, it's still a 65% increase. A 65% increase, based on what I've got here in front of me. And I do agree with Councillor Leslie, if we're going to put in place legislation for countback and the appropriate regulations that are needed to be attached to that legislation, then it should be clearly in the event of the by-election in that first period of time. I think it's 18 months after the formal council election. Then if there is someone leave, retire or whatever else, then that should be, the countback should apply. And of course saving, as I understood, I stand to be corrected, but I understood our 2017 by-election was about $138,000 cost to council. So, you know, being a councillor with fiduciary responsibilities, we've got to look at ways that we cut costs. It's difficult enough now with rate pegging and everything else, moving forward with the constraints of Fit for the Future and the like, just to be continually hit with ongoing costs. As far as I'm concerned, a 65% increase in the cost of running election compared to back to 2016 is not appropriate and not proper.
Any other speakers?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. I have mixed feelings on this as well, because I think that in the event that a by-election comes after 2 years and you still have 2-year term to go, the last one that was ready to come in but missed out may have moved from the area, may be sick, may not wish to run anymore. There is no guarantee that if anybody that was going to be next in line would accept that position after a certain amount of time. It was in the next 6 weeks, yes they would. 12 months, yes they would. But at the end of 2 years or 2.5 years, they could have gone into a different position in their work. I think it's a real gamble to know that anybody that just misses out would be likely to accept a position on council any time in that 4-year period. If it's well within the last half of that 4-year period, I think it leaves a lot of innuendos and a lot of uncertainty.
Councillor Ring.
Mayor Thompson, just to be clear, it's the first 18 months that the countback applies, not the first 2 years. And if someone doesn't want to stand, then I would imagine, and I'm happy to be corrected, that it would go to the next person. It saves us money, that saves money on the community, that can go to asset maintenance. The government brought this legislation in, Councillor McAndrew's right, they need to get on with the regulations or amend the legislation and remove the countback option. It just can't sit there indefinitely.
Look, I fully agree with that. They can't have that open-ended, whether the council has a countback system or whether they have a by-election, because I would say that would be up to the council of the day, how they perceived to go along with that. Even if we tonight, and I fully agree with Councillor Leslie, even if we agree tonight to go along with that, I would say that under the way this reads, that the council of the day will have the right to say whether they have a by-election or whether they have a countback system, wouldn't they? Mr. Gurney.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Just to add, because I've just pulled up the relevant OLG circular, that, sorry, I'll just find it again. So that in the last 18 months of council terms, councils retain the option of applying to the Minister for Local Government to dispense with a by-election. So they do still have that option right through the council term.
Okay, so I believe that we are voting tonight on what we perceive this council, the feeling of this council. Councillor Leslie, right to reply.
Sorry, have I finished?
Yep.
It's just that Councillor Statham's comment about people not necessarily wanting to take the position, that I understand completely. And indeed, in those jurisdictions, Tasmania and the ACT, where countback applies for their state governments, one of the provisions is that every person who is on the ballot paper is contacted and asked, do they want to be part of the countback process, and they have the right to say yes or no, and then of course they go. And people can, so the heir apparent, so to speak, the one who would expect to get in may choose not to. Well, that's fine. They just say no, and they're not included in the countback. And when they do the numbers, someone else comes out. Generally, the person who's next underneath. So it's a process that has been considered, and there's provisions for it already. I didn't think to put it in this particular motion, but I would hope that that when they do these regulations properly, they will check with the other jurisdictions that actually have countback and make sensible decisions on these things.
Okay, right to reply. I shall put. Councillor Leslie requests for update on the bed erosion, Bells Road, Lithgow, Bells Road, Lithgow, not Bells Line, Bells Road.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move.
Be the second. Thank you, Councillor.
I move that a report be brought down on the erosion of the creek bank adjacent to 2 Bells Road, Lithgow, and a time frame for when this matter will be resolved. Also note that there's no management comment. The General Manager's comment on this one. That actually surprised me. But so be it. Mrs. Bradford approached me on Australia Day 2017, almost 3 years ago, seeking a solution to this erosion, and before that, Councillor Ticehurst had raised the matter with Council. I've only one question. Why, in over 3 years, has nothing happened?
Mr. General Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Over 3 years, quite a lot has happened. And in relation to the comment from the General Manager, we do have a verbal report from the Director of Environment and Economic Development for Council on this matter. This is a matter between a landowner and another landowner. Council has no material interest in the matter. That was the case when this first started 3 years ago. The matter was between the owner or the occupant of Two Bells Road and a firm called Austin Butter, which was a subsidiary of Shell Corporation. Council has no control over the Shell Corporation or Austin Butter, but at that stage it was determined by Council that we should make every effort to assist the occupant of Two Bells Road. So to the extent that we could, we engaged in correspondence on behalf of the occupant, notwithstanding that we had no right and no jurisdiction over Austin Butter, the occupant, or Shell Corporation, which was based in Perth at that time. Quite a deal of negotiation has gone on by Council's administration under Mr Muir's guidance. It's been very difficult because we've been dealing with Shell Corporation solicitors through that time. A number of proposals were made by then, but again, I make the point that through the 3 years that we've been dealing with them, Council had no jurisdiction and no ability to impose anything on either the occupant or Austin Butter or Shell Corporation. We were simply a sideline, or sitting on the sideline, trying to get somebody to come to the party. To give an update on where that's at, I'll ask Mr Muir just to inform Council verbally.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a verbal report. I can reveal that the matter actually very closely didn't proceed at all based on legal advice on the terms that were being required by the current landowner that were not acceptable for inclusion in a deed to secure the transfer of land and funds to carry out the rectification works. And based on Council's legal advice, the matter was actually about to be reported to Council, recommending that it withdraw entirely from the matter. However, that being the case, we batted on and eventually the landowner relented. Now, just the last short period of time, the deed has now been executed by Council and sent to Austin and Butter for execution, along with a tax invoice of $15,000. A second payment of $15,000 will be made upon settlement, and after execution of the deed and receipt of the first instalment, Council will be entitled to proceed to engage a contractor to carry out the works and will be entitled to enter onto the land for that purpose.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
That has answered the question I had, so we've got the report.
Okay, I shall put that then. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. 10.1, McPhillamys Gold Project.
I'm happy to move, but I have a number of questions.
You know, and I'm happy to second.
Councillor Coleman.
I'm wondering if we can ask the following. What happens in 15 years when the project has ended? I mean, 90 kilometres of pipeline after that point won't be used. Will the company be made responsible to dig it up, or will that cause more environmental damage? I just want to know what happens in 15 years. I understand that 15 years to some is a long way away, but really it's not.
We got an answer to that?
Not specifically. There would be options available to the company. That would be, I mean, my understanding would be either to dig up and rehabilitate, or the pipeline to stay in place for another party to try and take advantage of that particular water. So they would be the two options. However, if Council wanted us to put something like that in a supplementary submission, we'd be happy to do that.
Sorry, can I go? Yeah, I think we need to. We need to understand what's going to happen in 15 years' time. As I said, 15 years to some isn't, you know, it's a long way away, but really it isn't. So, yeah, I'd like an extra submission, please.
Okay, Councillor McAndrew.
Could I'd like to put an extra 2 points to the recommendation, if I may. First, simply at the moment that the information, the report and the McPhillamys Gold Project be noted. I'd like a second point that we have a full information session for all councillors by Centennial Coal. They own the water, and I'll explain the reasons for that. And thirdly, in the report, after that information session for all councillors by Centennial Coal, we put forward a supplementary submission, which is talked about on page 10, if Councillor Coleman's happy to include those two.
Happy to accept that. That basically helps me with my questions.
The reason for number 2 is that ultimately the water being supplied to McPhillamys Gold Project will come from will it all come from Springvale, directly from Angus Place and Springvale, and then of course some left over at the Mount Piper Power Station. Everyone knows full well that we have a long-standing agreement with Centennial Coal to take unused water from their Clarence mine and anywhere else we can get it in times of drought. I think it's important that, and I know the report talks about the water that is being proposed to be sent is understood, and I'm reading from the report, to be of very poor quality when considered in the context of potential drinking water. Well, I'm not so sure of all that, so that's why I think it's important that we get a full presentation by Centennial Coal in relation to exactly where it's coming from and what it is, and then following on that, we get the opportunity to put that the supplementary submission, not only picking up some of the points that will hopefully come out of the presentation by Centennial Coal, but picking up the concerns that Councillor Coleman has raised about years and how long and everything else. And I think we need to, Centennial must have some idea about what it is, where it's coming from, and what in effect what the pipeline and the dimensions of the pipeline will need in relation to the water being supplied.
Look, if it's all right with the General Manager, Mr Muir can enlighten us a little bit on some of those questions, Councillor McAndrew.
I can provide some information from the EIS and I suppose our understanding and having had discussions with Centennial, but I'll see if this does assist. The water will come from three sources. The first call will be the surplus groundwater at Angus Place, which is currently discharged into the Cox's River via licensed discharge point known as LDP 001. Now, my understanding is that there's, pressure from the EPA to do something about that water. There are issues with turbidity, there are issues with electroconductivity in relation to that discharge, which makes it, as I said, the comment about being problematic in a drinking water context. The second call for the water would be from the Coal Services site, that's the washery site, which is currently discharged by Centennial via a licensed discharge point known as LDP 006 into the Wang Coal Creek. Once again, just from having a look and looking at the environment protection licences from the EPA for that site, it does appear that there are also, issues and pressures from the EPA regarding the quality of that water, and they clearly want Centennial to do something about that discharge sooner rather than later. And the third source of the water, the call on the water would be from the blowdown, the existing blowdown pond from the Mount Piper Springvale treatment facility, the new treatment facility. The blowdown water, as I understand it, is a byproduct of blowing out the boilers, and it goes to a pond where I imagine the real issue there is brine. So there's certainly issues with the water in that context. So they are the three sources of water.
Any other speakers?
Yes, Mayor Thompson, yes. The McPhillamy Gold Project how many submissions have been received against this project, Mr Muir, through you, Mr Mayor?
I have no idea, Mr Mayor. No, this is a matter between it's the Department of Planning, and it's in another local government area, so I'm unsure of what the submissions are.
No, I have received some myself. And in terms of the Portland Cemetery, how urgent is that there could be some problems foreseen in that area? Because that would definitely not be good.
My understanding is that we would be, and we have put in our initial submission, that we would like something done in relation to protect the cemetery where that pipeline goes, yes.
And is it true that a certain farmer on the Sunny Corner Area Way has decided to divert that pipeline away from his property?
No idea, don't know.
Okay, all right, thank you. Is there any way the council can receive the submissions so that we can read them, whether they're for it or against it?
Look, I think that it's covered in Councillor McAndrew's supplement couple of points there, because we'll be having an information session.
Yes, all right, that's good.
And we'll get that sort of information if needs be. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Yep. So if there's no other speakers, I'll put that. Oh, sorry. Write a reply.
My understanding, this is stake significant. We aren't actually the authority. Is that correct? We can put a submission in, but at the end of the day, it comes down to whether the state government approves it or not. Is that correct?
Any other speakers? No, well, that's right to reply. So I shall put that then. Those in favour of... thank you. You're unanimous. Very good. 10.1.2, high-tech quarry voluntary planning contribution.
I'll move that way. Thank you, Councillor Thompson.
Have I got a seconder?
Happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Ring. Councillor Statham.
High-tech quarry has been a wonderful voluntary planning contribution for our local government area for many years. And I'm absolutely delighted to see there's some new names in the projects that's going to be delivered some funding. In particular, people have been lobbying me for some time now for an agility program for dogs. And where some people may not like their dogs, other people love their animals and they like somewhere to go and to be able to give them exercise and you know, keep them quiet when they come home from their neighbours. So I'm delighted to see the agility program will be going ahead at Endeavour Park. I think there's going to be a lot of people very happy about that. And I think it's great that the council will install different equipment that will help maintain and manage that area as well. And I think through all of those, the diverse amount of people that's going to get money, I feel it's a great outcome. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Statham. Councillor Ring.
No, I think the report speaks for itself.
Yeah. Any other speakers?
Yeah, just a question on it, Mayor. I note that Lithgow Tidy Towns, Hartley District Progress Association, Hartley Historic Site Advisory Committee would advise their applications run successful. It seems to be clear on page 15 why the Hartley District Progress Association was unsuccessful, because there's RMS and landowners that need to support what's being proposed by them. But and it outlines the reasons why they were unsuccessful in relation to this round of grants. But the Hartley Historic Site and the Lithgow Tidy Towns, it doesn't give me any indication why they were unsuccessful. Yeah.
It's really just a combination of trying to develop some criteria as to what we actually sat down with representatives from the quarry and developing criteria as to what we thought that would be good in terms of public benefit, and then comparing that to the amount of money available. And in our view, in our recommendations, we think that the other projects are more suitable in that regard.
Councillor Statham, right to reply?
Thank you, Mayor Thompson. Note.
Righto, I shall put that then. Those in favour? Against? Carried. Unanimous. 10.1.3, two-storey dwelling, 37 Inch Street.
Happy to move, Mayor Thompson.
Councillor Ring and Councillor McAndrew. Councillor Ring.
A number of councillors did meet on site as requested. We looked at it. I've looked at this issue on a number of occasions. An offer was made by the proponent to put a water tank onto the site to deal with the problems of firefighting. I'm happy for that process to continue. I think due process has to occur. The proponent is happy for that to occur, but we'll come back to it in January. Thank you.
Andrew.
Yeah, look, just a question on reading the report. I thought that the part 2 of the recommendation talks about an alternative proposal. So I understood it, something had been put, but the report says no. So when we did the inspection on the site, that my understanding was that the staff responsible and the applicant would discuss some alternatives to try and deal with the water issue. But the report's saying that there's nothing that's come in, but I understood that there was a proposal that did come in.
Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. An initial submission was received via the applicant's consultant, talking about placing a tank roughly on the side of where the dwelling is, and also talking about how that, I suppose, relates to bush firefighting, which of course isn't the issue in this case. So the applicant was invited that if they wanted to get an expert view from a hydraulic consultant, then we would be in a position then to refer the matter to New South Wales Fire and Rescue and get their views on it. Bearing in mind that we have made it clear that the issue of firefighting and water, that's only one of the issues. The issue about the location of the main and the meter and those sort of things are still live. Yeah.
Any other speakers? Councillor Ring?
Just that, I mean, Mr Muir is correct. There are a couple of policy issues, but they are policy issues. They are not based in legislation, and I'll be bringing some noms to the next council meeting to address those. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ring. I shall put that then. Those in favour? Thank you. And unanimous. 10.1.4 has been dealt with. Airlie Coal Mine Proposal, Extension Project, Modification 3.
I'll second that.
Who moved it? I'm sorry. Councillor Smith and seconded Councillor Statham. Councillor Smith.
This is a very important project for Centennial Coal, as we all know. Over the last 12 months, they've struggled to get coal out of the ground, and this is to extend their mining lease would really put Centennial on the front foot.
Thanks, Councillor Smith. Councillor Statham.
I think it's finally some very good news for miners and their families in our district. I think it's wonderful news and fully support.
Any other speakers? Councillor Goodsall.
Yes, I agree. 45 extra jobs and lots of increased rail movements and not on our roads.
Very good. Okay. Beg pardon? Yeah. Councillor Smith, do you write a reply? Okay. I shall put that then. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Okay, 10.1.6, proposed renaming of Arnold Road, Sodwalls to Charlton's Road.
I'll move that. Thank you.
Happy to second.
Councillor Statham and seconded Councillor Coleman. Councillor Statham.
I think this is wonderful news for the Charlton family. They're a long-serving family in the Taranaki Sodwalls district, very respected, highly regarded, and I think it's something that's going to keep the history of the Charlton family alive and well with that name, if it's successful to be renamed.
Thank you, Councillor Statham. Councillor Coleman.
I think it's great that there was no submissions against the proposal, so clearly it's something that the community wants.
Thank you. Any other speakers? I shall put that then. Those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. Proposed road names: Eagle Hawk Close, Kenyon Close and Running Stream Close, KP.
Happy to move, Mayor Thompson.
Councillor Ring. Councillor McAndrew. Councillor Ring.
No, I think the report speaks for itself. It's straightforward. I don't think we need to...
Councillor McAndrew.
Details.
I'll put that then. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Proposed road naming: Angels Way, Capity.
I'll definitely move this.
And I want to second this.
Statham, Councillor Statham and Councillor Coleman. Councillor Statham.
This was a very, very tragic day for Capity. I think everybody in the district was talking about it for many months, and I think Angel Way is a perfect way to dedicate a name to a little girl that was killed. There was problems with emergency services. It was a very, very sad time, and I think Angel Way will be something reflective for the family to remember the rest of their lives.
Thank you.
I concur with Councillor Statham. This was a tragedy, and from this tragedy, we'll remember her this way. Remember the little girl.
Thank you. Any other speakers? I shall put that then. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Thank you. Renaming of Enfield Rifle Lane to Ray Swift Lane.
Yeah, I'll move it.
Councillor Goodsall, was it? Councillor Goodsall and Councillor Smith. Mr Muir would like to speak to this.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We did have some late information coming from the Geographical Names Board, which I propose to do something with, but I'll let the council know. The Geographical Names Board has told us that they won't support Ray Swift Lane as it contravenes their rules by the use of a given name with a surname. That's the rules of, I suppose, 2019. And whilst I accept that road naming rules are more recent, and I also note that other names, for example, John Mackey Drive, Ian Holt Drive, Thomas Mitchell Drive, Coldrew Drive, they technically contravene the rules as well. So my feeling is, if the council agrees, that I don't think we should give up on it, and I would propose that we add a new recommendation number 2 and take the current recommendations 2 and 3 to become 3 and 4. And the new number 2 would say, Council advised the Geographical Names Board that there is a precedent in the Lithgow local government area for road names containing both a given name and a surname, and to more accurately reflect her contribution to the community, Council wishes to proceed with the name Ray Swift Lane.
Yeah, Tony Lucchetti Sports Ground, George Coates Avenue. Yeah. They're everywhere. Councillor Wilson, do you need?
Yeah, well, I was just going to bring all those names up. I had George Coates Avenue, Coldrew Drive as well. So it's good that you're going to change that recommendation to reflect the work that Ray Swift's done in our community.
Yes, Mr Mayor. There's also Tom Leslie Place, and my mother was particularly honoured when that happened. I wasn't here at the time, but she was particularly honoured, so I endorse this completely.
This is a great thing, and I'd like to thank Councillor Goodwin for bringing this forward to our council chambers. This lady was a very well-known person in the community and an absolute champion with basketball. So, Councillor Goodwin, thank you very much.
From Canberra.
Yeah, look, I agree, and to remove the first name just makes no sense.
No.
Swift Lane, she was known, Ray Swift. Everyone knew her. It has to be Ray Swift.
Yeah.
It can't be anything else. It just makes no sense if it is.
Look, we've got the Jim Robson Aquatic Centre. We use first names in Lithgow, and it's been ongoing for some time, so I fully support it as well. Right, okay, then, if there's no other speakers, I shall put that. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Development applications by councillors and staff on council-owned land. Have I missed one, have I?
Yeah, you missed one, Councillor Thompson.
I have. Sorry. Adoption of Lithgow Community Participation Plan.
Happy to move.
Councillor Ring and Councillor Goodsall. Councillor Ring.
No, I think the report speaks to itself. I don't think there's a need to speak to it.
Councillor Goodsall. Any speakers?
Yes, Mr Mayor. I have problems with some of these response/actions. The number 3, where monetary value is not an indicator. The submission asked for perhaps a monetary value could be put on land so that neighbours could be notified, and the response is that monetary value is not an indicator of impact. Well, I've got to disagree with that. Directly opposite my house, my front gate, there's currently being built a house in place of where there was quite a pleasant little bungalow with one toilet and one bathroom, a huge place with about 6 en-suites, and it's huge. It has to be, I don't know, I haven't asked, but it has to be costing over $1 million to build. And the impact of that, as compared to the modest house that was there before, is significant. And I just believe that the comment that monetary value is not an indicator of impact is not actually accurate. I think it quite clearly is. Had it been a house not as big but 2 stories, the impact may even be less. So I'd like to see some other thoughts on this rather than just dismissing that particular comment. The next one I have problems with is that the submission is all council developments, such as sewerage pumping stations and roads, regardless of their cost, should be notified about. Council should regard itself and behave as a neighbour. In effect, I think, as a good neighbour. Now, if you have a neighbour and you're planning to do something with your place, it's good manners, it's good courtesy to notify the adjoining people that you're planning to put up a shed or whatever, extend to a second story, a swimming pool, and you let them know, and it may or may not come to the. It may not be sufficient for the council to notify the neighbour, but the neighbour themselves should do it. In this case, I think the council should consider itself to be the neighbour, and with the same good manners to notify their adjoining property that they're wanting to do it. I speak from personal experience here. Lithgow Council, here it is, Lithgow Council put a pumping station on my boundary. The water flows back onto my property. My mother was not notified, and I was not notified. I've read the report. The report was a general letterbox drop should be considered sufficient. It wasn't. It certainly wasn't considered sufficient for me. I took umbrage of it. I stood for election. Now, it may or may not have helped me get elected, and if it did, well, you're lucky you got such a good councillor. But it may apply for someone else. You have to be aware that what you do and what council does in dealing with neighbours has a response and has an action. Had I been notified, had my mother been notified, or had I been notified, and it's hard for me to know which is which, whether she was still alive at the time or not. But the first notice I got of it was someone knocking on my back door saying, we'd like access to your property because we're about to put a sewage pumping station on your boundary. Too late for me to do anything about it, except complain. Too late for me to do it about it, except for stand for council. All of which didn't help for me. And let me also tell you that the next time that pumping station leaks and overflows and puts sewage on my property, I just won't ring up the council and merely complain about it. I'll be suing this council for actions and damage to my property. Sewage on my property, when I'm trying to run a honey business or have honey on my place or have a vegetable garden down that area, is a serious matter. And it's a matter that councils should have the decency to tell their neighbours that it's on. And so that particular one is just wrong. And the response we've got here, such developments are not specifically exempt from notification under 237 of the CPP, council developments that require development consent under, etc. Okay. As far as I'm concerned, that phrase is just gobbledygook. That doesn't tell us anything. That's nothing. That's useless. Read it. Can anyone tell me what that actually means? Come on, you've all here. You've all seen it. It's just hopeless. And as far as I'm concerned, I'd like to move that all council developments, such as sewage pumping stations and roads, regardless of their cost, should be notified to the adjoining neighbour. And I'm going to move that as an amendment, that this particular clause in the Lithgow Community Participation Plan be changed.
Do you want to make a statement? Yeah. Mr Muir will just make a statement before I ask for a seconder.
I probably have an alternative suggestion. It's not really intent of a community participation plan under the Environmental Planning Assessment Act trying to catch developments, if you like, the domain of that particular type of document to catch council infrastructure developments such as roads or pipelines or that sort of thing. And we do have a very tight time frame to get this in. What I would probably suggest that it probably would be more appropriate if the council had a separate policy on dealing with notifications of its own infrastructure works, which should be separate to the community participation plan on developments.
Mr Mayor, the tight time frame is not my fault. This is the first I've had a chance to do it. It came out for public submission. Public submissions were put in, comments were put in, it's come to council. It's not appropriate that these things come to council so late that they can't be responded to.
Yeah, okay, then Councillor Leslie's put an amendment in. Have I got a seconder? And without no seconder, the amendment will lapse. So I shall put the motion if there's no other speakers.
No, can I ask,
yes.
Did I understand from Mr Muir that this area that's specifically being raised by Councillor Leslie will be pulled out and be separate? Have I got that right?
The council, or a councillor, of course, would have to move that the council looks at preparing a different policy for the notification of civil and infrastructure works.
I'd be happy to move a further amendment, Mayor, if that's the case. I think that sounds sensible. Yeah, that sounds sensible in my view. So, yeah.
Any speakers to Councillor McAndrew's amendment? I shall put that then. Do you want to speak?
No. I'm taking that bottom area will be removed. That's removed. That bottom area of page 31, and then at some given time in the future, a specific policy on that will be put to council on. I think that's a proper and appropriate way to go.
Just have a look.
Mr Mayor, can I just clarify, Councillor McAndrew, do you want a number 3 or is it an amendment you're proposing?
Just a suggestion again from Mr Muir.
Yeah, those comments I think Councillor McAndrew referring to aren't part of the recommendation. What I might suggest that probably the simplest way, if there was a number 3, a third point, to words to the effect that council staff bring back a report specifically in relation to a potential policy for the notification of civil and infrastructure works.
And that takes on board that we're certainly adopting
Yeah.
participation plan, less that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Okay, I shall put that then. Those in favour? Carried. We move to 10.1.12, leasing and licensing policy. 10.1.11, I'm sorry. I missed another one. Yeah. Development application by councillors and staff on council-owned land. You want to speak to that, Councillor McAndrew? Councillor Smith? Any speakers? Okay, I shall put that then. Those in favour? All in favour? Unanimous. Now we move to 10.1.12, leasing and licensing policy. Councillor Ring, have I got a seconder?
Happy to second.
Councillor Statham. Do you want to speak to that, Councillor Ring?
No, it's been a public. I'm happy for it to go straight through.
Yeah. Councillor Statham.
No, there's no submissions been involved, so happy to leave it as it is.
Okay, I shall put that then. Those in favour? Those against? Carried unanimous. 10.2.1, cemetery operations. Councillor Smith.
I'm going to call for a deferral on this.
What are we on, 10.1.12?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to call for 2.1. Yeah.
You're not moving the recommendation.
No, I'm moving. I want to put an amendment up. Sorry, that we defer this. So for an information session, and I'm asking for it to be in February because a lot of the councillors will be on holidays in January and December, and we need to get our heads around this and defer it till sometime in February.
Yeah. It's not pressing, is it? No. That's fine. And Councillor Ring?
Look, I concur with Councillor Smith. I mean, members of the public forum raised concerns. I think there are some issues we need to discuss further. It may result in no change, it may result in some change to the policy, but I think we need a bit more time to discuss options.
I agree, Mayor. I've read the proposed policy in some detail. It's quite extensive, and Mrs. Graves has picked up some issues in it, and I've also picked some issues up in it as well. It seems, in some parts, seems to be a bit contradictory. So I think it's appropriate we have a full information session about it, so we can get the opportunity to openly discuss some of the proposals within it and understand some of the proposal that's in it as well.
Okay, any other speakers on this? No? I shall put that then. Those in... Carried unanimous. Proposed off-leash dog...
I'll move this, Councillor Thompson.
And I'm...
Mayor, can I just ask one thing? May I be excused? I'm crook.
Yep, by all means.
I need to go home.
Thank you. Councillor Statham, did I have a seconder there?
Yeah, me. Sorry. Councillor Coleman.
Yes, this has been a difficult situation because I received over 20 emails, quite some aggressive emails to say that they weren't lobbied at any stage for a dog park to be built in the Vale. Since then, I've done a lot of inquiring, and it appears that there are some people in favour of it, but the majority of people are not in favour of it, and they had no contact from the councillor that did the notice of motion. So I'd have to say that I agree with the comments from the...
Point of order. It's irrelevant that the statement... Yes, it is. It's irrelevant if people were not contacted by Councillor Goodsall in putting up that notice of motion. It's irrelevant. She was obviously contacted by someone.
Look,
I'm not here to argue. I'm just saying
I'm here calling a point of order, which the Mayor can...
Look, I take on board your point of order. The particular notice of motion did go out for public consultation. That's what it was that's what it was about. So, yeah, it did go out for public consultation. So if you could just refer to the notice of motion,
yes,
Councillor Statham.
Well, it's very obviously that the people in the Vale do not wish to have this dog leash park, and I think it should be voted against tonight.
Reading the report, I see that it was 2-1 against in regards to the dog park, and I too received communication from a number of angry residents. It's quite clear the community did not want to have this, though that's what consultation is for. Congrats to the council for listening to the community, and I'm pleased that we never had to come to the stage where a rescission motion was required.
Look, just a statement from I supported it on the night, but the whole notice of motion was to go out to consultation to the people of the Vale, and the people of the Vale said no. So that's exactly where it finishes. Councillor Ring, I'm sorry.
Basically, you took the words from my mouth. As Councillor Coleman would say, it's Councillor Goodsall's right to bring that to the council as a notice of motion. She did. The community were consulted. Overwhelmingly, they said no. End of matter. That's it. It's that simple. The fact that it was beat up in the community is none of our concern. It was taken out of all proportion.
Okay, if there's any other speakers? No? I shall put that then, that does not go ahead. Those in favour? Thank you. Carried. Request fee waiver, Portland Australia Day celebrations.
Happy to move, Mayor.
Councillor McAndrew, do you want to speak to that, Councillor McAndrew?
No, it's self-explanatory, Mayor.
Councillor Ring?
I've spoken to Mr Edgecombe about this. I mean, there's no budget identified for it. We get a number of these requests in a year. Next Operations Committee meeting, I want to table this issue so we can look at developing a policy for providing support to community groups for traffic control for these events, and that we actually budget for it. I see it as a complete waste of time for the staff and for council for these individual requests to come in one at a time. There should be a policy that addresses, there should be a budget allocation, and I will raise that and discuss that at the next Operations Committee meeting so that we can bring it back to the next council meeting.
Any other speakers?
Yes, Mr Mayor, has asked Mr Edgecombe, the Director, has this actually come to the Traffic Committee, the TALC meeting, whether to...
The scale of the road closure doesn't need to be, it's not common for council to take these minor road closures to the Traffic Committee. The impact is rather minor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. That's a good answer, and I'm happy with that. It's just it's an opportunity, though, to remind those who might be listening that road closures generally need to be advised to the council and therefore and from the council to the local traffic committee as early as you can, because at some point somebody on the traffic committee, whether it's the police or the RMS or even perhaps the council representative, will say, you have not given sufficient notice, you've been warned so many times, your application has been refused. So it is an opportunity to pass that word on, that the road closures, generally speaking, do need to have the approval of the RMS, the police and the council.
Okay, any other speakers? I shall put that then. Those in favour? Carried unanimous. Water and wastewater report, 3.
Happy to move.
Happy to second.
Moved Councillor McAndrew, seconded Councillor Ring. Councillor McAndrew.
The report in itself is fairly straightforward. It talks about the capacity of both Farmers Creek and the operation of the Clarence transfer system, and of course Oberon Dam, which I note is getting fairly low. But it also goes on to say that at the bottom of page 41, that council has managed water demand in accordance with the Fish River water stream drought management strategy. So it's clear that we're working within the guidelines in relation to where everyone seems to be at the present moment in this terrible drought. I'm just wondering, I don't think it needs to be a point, the recommendation simply noting the report. At the next water report next year, can we just get a breakdown of how much the Clarence water transfer system run during the 12 months? I know it comes with each of the reports, but I'd like to know, with so much money we've invested there, how often we've run the Clarence transfer system over a 12-month period. I know at the bottom of page 43, it talks about the Clarence transfer system operated from the 21st of August 2019 up until 11th of September 2019. The system was shut down due to dam level and forecast rain. Well, thankfully we heard a bit of that tonight, sorry. So if I can put it as a formal second point if you need be, but I don't think it requires it. If we can just have that written into the water report next year.
Just a question for you, Mr Mayor, to the administration. As Councillor McAndrew said, the report notes that the Clarence water transfer system has not operated since the 21st of August 2019. I'd just like to know at what point that is going to be started up again.
Through you, Mr Mayor, that would be today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mr Mayor. Sure, we heard rain tonight. It won't have broken the drought. I mean, I doubt that we got more than 25 mils. 20. We have to consider that this drought is ongoing. We have to consider that there's no real belief that it's going to break soon. I think we need to take water restrictions seriously. I think we have to start at some point. The Clarence transfer is good for us. I accept that. but it only fills Farmers Creek Dam. It doesn't put water into Oberon Dam. Oberon Dam, of course, is on the other side of the Great Divide. I think we should always be slightly conscious of the fact that we're taking water from the western side of the Great Dividing and moving it back to the east. That's some people think that's wrong, but it's the way it is. I'd like to move that water restrictions be imposed once Oberon Dam reaches 30% and not be lifted until Oberon Dam reaches 60%. I'm not sure at what level, but I think we should at least start with level 1, so that people of Lithgow, are aware that this is ongoing. This is a problem that we are likely to face into the future. I've just tried to check back on these graphs. It seems to me that the last time Oberon Dam was at 60% was in March, approximately, depending on where you put the line, March 2018. It's quite likely to reach 30% very soon. It's timely. I think we need to take it. We can't do it in December. We're not meeting. January, well, who knows where we are by then. I think we need to put a line, a comment. If the rain continues and Oberon Dam fills up, no problem, no harm done. But if it doesn't, and we keep dropping at the rate we're dropping, we'll hit it very soon. We'll hit it before the next, probably the end of January. So that's why I'm going to move. That water restrictions at level 1 be imposed once Oberon Dam reaches 30% and should not be lifted until Oberon Dam is filled to 60% capacity.
Look, just before I ask for a second, can I get a comment from Mr Buckins? Do we need water restrictions?
It's certainly a decision for the councillors to make. My recommendation would be not to impose restrictions at this point in time. We do manage our resource in accordance with the drought management plans that were prepared by the state and Fish River. And as you can see by the graph on table 42, our restriction levels are based on that graph. So as you can see, demand currently is lower than what the level 4 restriction is. So at 20%, if our demand starts to trigger up above those lines at those restriction levels, that's when restrictions would be implemented. Now, it's a decision of the council to impose that. We can manage those demand curves through Clarence. There's ample supply coming out of the mine at the moment. We can shift our supply zones to shift further to the villages so that we don't have to implement restrictions. That was the idea of the upgrade of the Clarence Transfer Scheme. This is, it's a serious matter. We're dealing with it a little bit differently. Our smart metering is currently saving us around 1,200 litres an hour in what we've detected in leaks from the 3,300 metres that we've installed. So we're actively managing demand and decreasing the amount of leaks that we've got through the network, which is basically holding water in storage. When it gets to the point of implementing restrictions, it needs to be done, and it needs to be done at a higher level. We're seeing at the moment that there's been a very steep decrease in demand. People are conscious and people are using less without us imposing restrictions. So without doing anything, people are already mindful. Putting restrictions in at this point I don't think will give you any benefit, and we're currently managing it in accordance with those drought management plans that are approved by the state.
Mr Gentleman.
Through you, Mr Mayor. Daniel, would there be any cost to council if it limited water access because of restrictions?
It certainly does. Because we pay a fixed access amount of 80% of our allocation, it costs us about $1.2 million in access fees from the Fish River. If we reduce via restrictions, we also reduce our amount of revenue to cover that cost. We have gone to the state and asked during this period that some of those costs be waived, and we will then look to reduce our demand on Fish River even further. At this point, it's not economical to do that. It would have huge budget implications. Now, restrictions will do that regardless, but it's about balancing that out too.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you very much for that report. In light of that report, actually, I will withdraw my motion. I wanted to raise the issue. I felt it's important. I felt that we needed to deal with it, and I thank you for that. But I would hope that we can get, perhaps at the Operations Committee or whatever, further. Well, I know we do, but further reports on that. And if the situation changes, well, let's act there.
Sure, if the situation changes, Mr. Buckets will fix us up.
Thank you.
Yes.
Probably something that should have been said during the annual report. I mean, people criticise council, as not doing things. But one of the biggest tasks as a council we've had is to upgrade our financial management. And I think we've done a great job on that. And the reports that come through the finance officer, Mr Gurney, of a high standard. When we have finance committee meetings, the questions asked, you can't answer it, we've got the answer the next day. I think kudos to the staff for the work that they've done in getting our house in order.
Happy to second.
I think it's straightforward. I don't think there's any need to discuss it.
Yeah, could I just ask if Councillor Ring would agree? I think there should be 2 points for the recommendation. Recommendation 1, that Council note the report, but I think there should be a second point to endorse the GM signing of the agreements. I know he's able to do under his delegation, but there's been a lot of work taken place with this, and I know that there was a fairly tight timeline, and I think not just noting it, I think we should be endorsing. Sorry, I'll wait for the next one then. Investment policy, we're on. Yeah,
I'll move that
I'd like
way.
to move. I'd like to move if I could. And not only to note the report, but endorse the, I think Councillor Statham did, endorse the GM signing of the agreements, because it's fairly important. There was a very tight timeline, and yes, I think, and the type of money and the change that's proposed, the 3 different energy providers now, we should be, as I said, endorsing the GM signing on the as well.
Yes, after reading the lengthy report, I think that the General Manager has been delegated to make a decision on these choices, and I think he's made a very good decision. To note, going into the future, we have lots of savings ahead, so I think that's a very positive sign.
I have questions. I have no issue with the recommendation and I fully support it. My question is, have we ever done an energy audit before? And are we utilising the opportunity of solar lighting somewhere?
I'm pretty sure we have, but I can't recall.
Through you, Mr Mayor, I'd have to take it on notice. I can't answer whether we've done an energy audit previously, unless there's members in the...
I'm happy for you to take that on notice.
Yep. As far as utilising solar, we are actively looking at that. I think there's 3 proposals that we're looking at the moment in relation to solar. You'll be aware that I think it was the Portland Golf Club that recently got a approval for solar. We're looking at solar on the roof here. And we have had discussions with Wesrock in relation to a wholesale power purchasing agreement, but we need clarification from the Department of Local Government, because what's being proposed, in my view, is probably more an investment than it is a purchase of power. We just need to make sure we're not falling foul of the Treasury investment guidelines in relation to that.
So I'm assuming, sorry, that we'll be bringing reports back at a later date next year.
Yes, once we get the advice from the OLG and our solicitors, it's got to come to council.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Councillor, I'm very sure that there was electricity audit done when we were with Centrock, but I just can't recall how far.
So maybe we're overdue for one.
Yeah.
So, Mr Mayor, the General Manager just commented that we're looking at putting solar panels on the roof. It should be more than that. The Council actually resolved in approximately March, April 2017 to do exactly that. It was a recommendation from the Environment Committee, and it was carried by the Council. I was wondering if we could have an update on exactly where we are on that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Perhaps I didn't complete the explanation. We have proceeded with it. It's in the capital budget for this financial year, as I understand it, and quotes have been sought, so it's progressing.
Councillor McAndrew.
Yeah, just on that last point, I understood we were looking at LED lighting anyway in our public, in our street lighting as well. I know that's a decision we also make.
Yeah, we are.
And that's certainly a lot cheaper. They work a lot cheaper, yep.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I'm informed that's completed, but we're also, through the Smart Cities project, looking at the potential or the capability of our street lighting to do more than just light as well.
Okay, I shall put that then if there's no other speakers. Those in favour? Thank you. Carried unanimous. Lone Water Fund Reservoirs Upgrade, 1045. Moved Councillor Ring.
Have me in a second.
Seconded Councillor Coleman. Councillor Ring.
It's critical that our water infrastructure is maintained to a high standard, particularly during droughts. What I did read in the report is that because of the early repayments of the Portland STP loan, basically this loan will have no impact on our repayment schedule, or our total loans that we have at the moment, which is good. But another issue we need to discuss at the Operations Committee meeting before the end of the year is what we're going to do with the water pipes, other critical infrastructure, and what loans we need to borrow. In the last couple of weeks we've had more pipes burst. We need to bite the bullet and make decisions as a council on where we go with this.
My understanding is that we're only sourcing of the loan. I'm assuming before it's signed, sealed and delivered, it'll be coming back to council.
That would be correct. I can bring another report to council once we've sourced the loan with the details.
Thanks.
Councillors, just before we move on, if I could just ask a question of the staff, Mr Buckins, have we finalised our mapping for our water pipes as yet?
We are in the process of engaging consultants to go through and actually survey. We have engaged a firm to come in and do condition assessments via an internal method. They're not able to get to site until February to commence that. So it is happening. Most of the new areas are fairly reliable. It's the older part of town, so the central part of Lithgow, back out towards the water plant, that we are having some difficulty with.
Okay, any other? Councillor
Look, I do need a clarification of the recommendation based on the response that was just given. If I'm reading the recommendation, it's very clear. The recommendation is that council approve the sourcing of a $950,000 loan for the water reservoirs upgrade project from a lending institution approved by the Office of Local Government. I'm understanding we're approving it. It goes ahead. as long as it's an institution approved by the Office of Local Government. That's what the recommendation is.
That's what the recommendation says, yes.
If that's the case, I'd like to withdraw that. I'll be the seconder then.
Have we got a seconder then to the recommendation?
Yes.
Councillor McAndrew. Any other speakers? I shall put that then. Those in favour? Against? Councillor Coleman. Uh, 10.5, annual report. What's the feel of the council?
Yeah, I'm happy to move it.
Have we got a seconder? Councillor Goodsall. Councillor McAndrew.
You know, it's our 2018-19 annual report. It is what it is.
Yep.
That's there in the attachments, and we're recommending the recommendation for us to adopt. 2018-19 annual report, year in review, 2018-19 supplementary state of environment report, 2018-19 disability inclusion action plan report, which comprise the 2018-19 annual report.
Yep. Councillor Goodsall. Any other discussion? Councillor Leslie.
Are these reports basically what we've done in the past, or are they sort of items for what we plan to do in the future?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yeah, this is looking back at the last year.
So it might explain why the notice of motion that Councillor Coleman moved some time back about getting a report on ramps and pram access for the high pedestrian areas is still being awaited.
I believe I provided a full report on ramps and their compliant nature, whether they were or were not, to the operations committee that then went through council. I believe that happened a couple of months ago.
Thank you, Mr. Rich.
I just have a question. In regards to the Disability Inclusion Act, are we usually at this time of year do a function in regards to Don't Diss My Ability. Are we still doing that? Like Don't Diss My Ability awards? We've been doing that for the past couple of years, but I haven't seen anything recently.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, I'm not aware that we are running it this year, but I can take that on notice and find out for you.
Great, thank you.
Any other discussion? Councillor McAndrew.
Just in response to the question by Councillor Leslie, yes, the annual report's reporting on what's done, the year in review's reporting on what's done, the state environment report I expect is talking about what's been done. I would have thought the 2018-19 Disability Inclusion Action Plan would be also what's been done, but what we'll be doing in the future. That's to answer the question that was asked.
Mr. McGrath.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. It's reporting to a plan. So the plan that's already been developed, what we actually achieved in the last financial year.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I was happy to let the matter drop, but Councillor McAndrew decided to raise it again, so perhaps it just explains...
Well, I had the right of reply, Mayor. It was my right of repair, so there's no more. It was my right of repair.
You're no longer the Deputy Mayor of this council. I think you can sit down and wait.
Point of order, Mayor. It was my right of reply.
You did have your right of reply, and that's finished at Councillor Leslie. Thank you.
And, of course, he raised
Councillor Leslie.
new matters, which was...
Councillor Leslie.
I understand he doesn't want to speak.
Okay, I shall put that. He's had his right of reply. I'll put that motion. Those in favour?
I'll move that.
Happy to second.
Yes, Mayor Thompson. I realise we had a very short time constraint to complete and organise suitable work to be done to gain money back into our local area with this drought appeal. I think that it's been handled possibly as well as it could have been, but I've been to every drought event, and including some of Colin Seal's talks, and I think there's been a lot of money, I can't say wasted, but I think there's been a lot of money possibly spent quickly to enable us to get through the ticking the boxes. But certainly I've had a lot of feedback, and it's not been positive, unfortunately. Some of it has, but I think at Hampton the other day there was probably 8 farmers, and I don't think anyone, maybe one, would have approved of what the new farming techniques are that they're suggesting. I think that we need to make sure at any cost in the future that any catering that is done through our local caterers. Any music that is involved in any functions whatsoever, we need to be using all the music that we can use, any lighting facilities, anything that we can do to bring money back into our main street and our businesses. I really have thought a lot about this before I have said anything, but the health, mental and wellbeing community, the farmers aren't coming out. They're not going to go and see people. They've got a lot of pride, they're time poor, they're stressed to the max. I think that the government has got it really wrong. I think they should have done a means test on the farming and found out the farmers in our LGA that have no other income coming in at all, they're sole farmers, there's not many of them, they should have been given a tank, some water, $1,000 diesel voucher, $1,000 food voucher and a $500 chemist voucher to spend in our LGA, and then go to the next tier where the wife might be working 1 day a week and the farmer not working. None of these farmers are actually getting something out of this, and I've been round every one of them. So I think that we need to listen to the feedback and maybe divert away from those type of functions. I noticed that the ramp people have been there. There's been 4 and 5 at every event, 2 and 3 council staff at every event. You take those out, and myself and a couple of others, you know, the numbers have been very bad. And, well, bad in the big scheme of things, that they thought it was either a fundraiser or they thought that they were going to get something mentally good out of it. I've spoken to a lot of people. I don't want to be negative because the council staff work very hard to get to these guidelines. But I think if it's possible to try and see if we can navigate a way through to get some of the farmers to themselves, to go to the coalface and see what they want. I don't know whether that's possible or it's not in the criteria. In the event it's not in the criteria, I think we need to move away from the mental health side of things, maybe give them some money to go to do their own mental health. They're not going to in a public space. I watched the last 4 events and I saw a couple of people chatting, and I think the regenerative farmer telling you to move your stock every day. I mean, people were rolling their eyes at Hampton on Saturday afternoon. It's not what we do locally. I'm not saying it's what he doesn't do at Gilgandra, but farmers here are very practical. They plough their land, they use insecticides and pesticides. This man was saying we don't need to do that anymore, at a huge cost, So I think we need to go back to basics, and is it possible to have an information session as soon as possible for all of us to put our thoughts forward so that we can try and work out a way that we can get accolades for the council in a number of ways to fit the criteria.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor.
I can't say I agree with a lot that the councillor has spoken about. Drought communities. The program is drought communities, not drought for farmers. And I understand farmers are suffering. That's fine, but this is for the whole community. The whole community is suffering during the drought. As a council, we voted on what programs would go ahead. Now, some haven't gone ahead because of delays in sourcing material, whatever. Now, last week, Councillor McAndrew, the Mayor, myself, were at, I think, Nepean Health, Western Health, Health and Wellbeing, Grants, Wentworth, that's it, sorry. And there are farmers going to programs. They are getting support. They are getting individual attention and support. This was for the whole community to come out and relax. So there are only 4 farmers that Councillor Statham knew. Maybe she knows every councillor in the community, I don't know. But I think the staff have done a wonderful job under difficult circumstances. We've complied with the government's requirements. We didn't set the criteria, the government did. As for farmers not agreeing with new approaches to farming, well, that's on them. That's up to them to decide. But I don't think council should be criticised for bringing in someone to offer an alternative approach which works in other areas. I think council staff should be congratulated. And the fact that a lot of what we did was based on advice and information from the local branch of the New South Wales farmers. And if you talk to the local branch of New South Wales farmers, mental health is a key issue for them. So I congratulate the staff on getting as much done as they could under difficult circumstances.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to clarify, we can certainly have an information session for councillors with a view to gaining feedback and feeding that back to the federal government. Councillor Ring was quite correct. The criteria for having these functions and spending the money was not set by us, it was set by the federal government through its department. We did consult with the community to find out what they wanted, but at the end of the day, the approval was forthcoming from that department, that federal department. Importantly, one of the key criteria was that local governments could not spend on areas that would normally fall within their jurisdiction, their normal budget process. It had to be outside of that. And again, the concept was it was more about trying to get employment going within the area itself. So to the extent that there is feedback out there regarding what people think was inappropriate expenditure, we can certainly gather that and feed it back in through our federal local member. Interestingly, he is aware that there's a lot of criticism coming from the community in relation to some of the functions. We did meet with Mr G 2 weeks ago. Last Wednesday, and he offered that comment that in fact he was aware of the criticism coming in, not just from this community, but from a whole range of government because of the criteria that had been set by the government through its department. So we have limited control.
Just to back up what the General Manager has said, our federal member has done his own survey, and he realises that some of the criteria that the government set was not appropriate, or as far as the submissions coming back from some of the people. But it looks like Lithgow will be getting another $1 million, and the criteria will change to the effect that we need to build something and employ local tradesmen and so forth to build those particular things, whatever we come up with. So it will be build, and using local labour. If there's no other discussion, I shall put that then. Those in favour? Those against? Carried. 10.5.3, Code of Conduct Statistics. If I could get somebody to move. Councillor Ring. Second it.
Happy to second.
Councillor Goodsall. Councillor Ring.
My understanding from a report, this is a statutory requirement. The council is required to prepare 3 months after the end of the financial year. Given the subject nature, there's not much we can discuss in relation to it. We can't query it in detail because all the requirements around confidentiality. I think we just do as requested, and that is to note the report.
Thank you. Councillor Goodsall. No.
I have a question, not relating to the report, but similar to it.
What's the question, Councillor Coleman?
In regards to the circular from the Office of Local Government regarding a Supreme Court ruling, I'm wondering if there's going to be any training sessions for councillors in regards to that, or information into the future regarding that. I did a training session at the local government conference. I thought it was quite worthwhile.
Mr. General Manager.
I'm not aware of the. I'm aware of the Supreme Court ruling that the department's grappling with, but I'm not aware of any solution they provided at this point in time. So I guess we're waiting to see what the Office of Local Government comes out with, because at the moment we've got a code of conduct where council's ability to issue penalties previously has been taken away from them. So we need to find out from the Office of Local
Yeah,
Government.
that's why I'm asking if there's going to be an informational training, so you're waiting on that.
As soon as we get advice, yes, we'll certainly do an information session.
Mayor Thompson, might I add some information to the response from the General Manager? At the local government conference, I spoke to the Office of Local Government staff. I asked them what they're going to do to fix up their problem. They advised me that within the regulations that a council can determine to have the penalties or whatever referred to the appropriate director in the Office of Local Government. They haven't put that in their circular, but that's the information I was provided on the day.
That's not the information I was provided in the training session. That's why
Okay,
I'm
then
asking.
we'll leave that. We'll leave that until the right information comes back. Okay. Thank you. Councillor McAndrew.
Look, I have some questions on the statistics. Of course, no names are mentioned, but I just want to clarify a couple of things with the statistics. I take it there's been 4 code of conduct complaints made about councillors and the General Manager. 4. Goes on further to say that 2 were referred to a conduct reviewer. Is that 2 out of the 4? And it goes on further to say 2 finalised, so is that referring to the 2 that was referred?
I can't, it's up to...
So...
Yes.
Mr Mayor, that's correct. There were 4 and 2 have been referred. The 2 that have finalised were the ones that were referred to the conduct reviewer.
So what happened to the other 2?
They weren't code of conduct. They were deemed not to be.
Talks about 1 determined not to be a code of conduct complaint. So it seems to say to me that there's 1 out there somewhere.
No. The one that was referred to the Office of Local Government was deemed to be taken no action on.
Yep.
And 1 which was referred to a conduct reviewer was determined not to be a code of conduct matter.
So really out of the 4 there was only 2 that could be deemed a code of conduct matter.
That's it. That's right. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Leslie.
Excuse me, oh, sorry.
No, if you
Mayor Thompson, was this just in the previous 12 months from September to September?
It would be.
That's correct.
October 1, 2018 to September 2001.
Did you get that? October 1, 2018 till September 2019? Yes. Now, Councillor Leslie.
Like Councillor McAndrew, I'm also a bit, well, perhaps he wasn't, but I'm slightly confused about these statistics as well. We've got four in the top square, 2 referred, 2 finalised, but somehow or other, no people were actually investigated by a conduct reviewer during the period. How did they not get investigated? I mean, they're referred to investigators, but then they just disappeared, did they? So, point D, the number of code of conduct complaints investigated by a code of conduct reviewer during the reporting period, 0.
0.
So, does this include, the matter arising from the special meeting held in January, for example, or is it? Can I have an explanation for this? Does the barrister in Orange not get paid?
I can't comment on that, Councillor Leslie.
Well,
this is all confidential as far as.
I'm not asking for names. I'm just asking,
Mr. Mayor,
that $13,000. How can there be an expense if there was no one who was investigated?
Mr. Mayor.
Mr Mayor, I can't go into details, of course, and this, I'm deemed to be the council's appropriate person, and Mr McGrath's the alternate. It just happens to be that Mr McGrath's dealt with most of these matters this year, thus a report under his hand, but we've both worked on this report, and it is 100% correct, this report. In a code of conduct matter, and I suppose councillors might know that I've had a fair bit of experience now in code of conduct matters, the conduct reviewer has certain actions open to him or her, and as is stated in the 3rd column down on the right-hand side, it explains the various parts of the respective procedures of the procedures for the dealing with the administration of the Model Code of Conduct. And not all actions open to a conduct reviewer in dealing with a matter are an investigation, and that's probably the only way I can answer it.
Mr Mayor, what I read from this is that there's one, perhaps more, codes of conduct that are just being held in abeyance, waiting for an appropriate time to drop them. And I think that's totally inappropriate. And that's what you get if none have been investigated, but 4 have been started. It's just so who is going to drop it, and when are they going to drop it? Are they going to wait till August next year? Is that the idea?
No.
Oh, I should hope not, but that's not what we're getting.
Complaints investigated by conduct was nil, but that didn't stop him from reviewing some of the code of conduct.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, the reports are generally done by the coordinator of the Code of Conduct. Obviously, I have a conflict here because I was one of the individuals where a Code of Conduct was lodged. Therefore, it's not appropriate for me to generally talk about those. But I can say that the staff are in a difficult position because they cannot talk individually about each matter. If Council so desires, in accordance with Councillor Leslie's request, we're more than happy to write to the Department of Local Government and ask them permission to reveal to councillors the details of the Code of Conduct, and we'll abide by the Department's assessment. The management team cannot talk about the Code of Conduct matters aside from what's contained in the report, which is prescribed. That has been reinforced to us by the office previously. We'll go back and ask them again.
Mr Mayor, I'm not asking for that at all. And just for the record, I'm not being investigated. I'm not even sure whether I'm allowed to say that I'm not being investigated, but I'll take the risk. I'm not being investigated, but I certainly don't want to ask and have someone else dropped in it. But what I'm really concerned about is that somebody might decide to drop them in it at a time not at an inappropriate time. This whole process is, in my view, completely unfair and completely arbitrary, and it victimises people who haven't even been able to prove their innocence. I mean, not all codes, as it's been pointed out, not all codes of conduct are actually genuine, but nonetheless, here it is. People are being, potentially smeared. People are not known, and they're left waiting for the axe to drop. I think the whole matter needs to be referred to the state government to have it fully investigated and the matter appropriately treated so that everyone is given the rights to a hearing, and because justice delayed is justice denied, and that's what's happening here for these people who. No.
Mr Mayor, Council, it's very hard for us to respond to the criticisms if you're not prepared to move a motion.
I know I've already spoken, but I think that's why in regard to information and training is really important. That's why if we could, try and get, soon as the Office of Local Government comes back in regards to that circular, the better, so that we have a full understanding of where we all stand. I'm happy to second.
Oh no, it's very straightforward, Mayor Thompson.
This committee works tirelessly, and they should be congratulated.
Any other speakers? I shall put that then. Those in favour? Against? Carried.
Mayor, if I may, just probably more for clarification, the issue Mr Kern raised about the Old Portland Hospital, did we give a commitment that we'd look into that, or is that a... Yeah, but I understand we've got the opportunity, if something's in disrepair, we've done it before with shop owners in Lithgow, if the grounds are overrun with weeds and things like that. I understand that we've got the right to request and have a look, and I can recall we've talked about the private property with the Coles New World a lot of times. So,
I've just been given a commitment that we will inspect it.
Okay, happy with that.
Councillors, Mr Mayor, through you, there are personal matters relating to the applicants that have been circulated for Council's confidential assessment. It would be quite wrong, in my view, to allow those personal matters to be made public. This is a matter of privacy for the individuals that were good enough to apply.
Also, not feeling well. I'd like to excuse you.
Okay, the reason for confidential report, the report confidential is in accordance with section 10A2 of the Local Government Act, which permits the meeting to be closed to the public relating to the following personal matters concerning particular individuals other than councillors. We're not going to recess, we'll get it over and with. Yeah. I'll just wait for Councillor Ring to come back and Councillor Goodsall and... good one, I mean, sorry. Okay, we're all,